A thin autumn mist drifted over the scarred ruins of the Blackwater, weaving among broken masts and the stumps of scorched scorpions like Pelog-stranded ghosts. Robb Stark reined his courser on the river road and stared across the soot-charred waters toward the Red Keep that loomed above the city like a wounded giant. The rising sun licked its towers in molten light, but for all the flame in the sky, King's Landing felt chill, a hush before the hammer of war's last, inevitable blow. Somewhere beyond those walls lay the chair of swords whose edges had bled half a realm. Somewhere inside marched the last lions of Casterly Rock, ragged, proud, and desperate. Robb lifted his wolf-stamped helm, letting the morning's damp bite at sweat-damp hair. The air smelled of nettles, pine pitch, and distant carrion yet unburied. He remembered other mornings on calmer roads, gray wind pacing at his stirrup, his father's voice rumbling of honor and duty, but the direwolf had fallen at the Twins, and Eddard Stark's head still adorned Southern songs as proof of Lannister power. Let them sing, Robb told himself. Let them choke on the last verse, for I will write the ending with steel. To his left rode Greyjohn Umber, broad as a siege tower, beard laced with river mud and blackened blood. King Robb, he growled, voice roughened by smoke and sleepless nights. The last outriders report no lions beyond the Mudgate. Jaime means to keep every man within the walls. Robb studied the ramparts. Fresh crimson banners snapped from the merlons. Crimson stripped of its regal gold bar. Crimson alone. Blood without glory. He knows he cannot meet us in the field, Robb said. If the gates open, chaos devours him. If they stay shut, famine finishes what our swords began. He could skulk away by sea, Umber muttered. Not with his pride, Robb answered. Jaime Lannister would rather die a hero on every tongue than slip away a beaten cur. The great Joan's chuckle was half a snarl. Then he means to choke the city on honor. Robb touched the pommel of his sword, a broad northern blade forged from the scant shards that remained of his father's greatsword, ice. The Valyrian steel gleamed a smoky purple beneath morning light. Less than the original, yet still enough to answer any Lannister steel. We will not starve the small folk, he said. We end it quickly. Umber cocked a brow. A storming? No. Robb turned his horse. A duel. Within the Red Keep, Jaime Lannister stood before the smoldering hearth of Maegor's Holdfast, polishing the crimson enamel from his golden Kingsguard breastplate. The hall lay near empty save for a maester measuring poison vials for the wounded and the weary shuffle of a squire stacking broken shields. Moonlight had already fled the windows when a raven-haired knight limped in, cheeks hollowed by hunger. Sir Kevin's eldest, Lancel, bore word of plague in Flea Bottom, mummer whispers of wolves at the gates, and merchants roasting the last of their salted dog. Jaime listened, dismissed him, then stared into the dying coals. It was almost a relief to imagine a sword ending it, cleaner than the slow rot creeping through the city's bowels. He flexed his hand, the sword hand, the one long gone. The gold prosthetic gleamed in the flame, each joint etched with lions that bared silent fangs. 6 years ago, he would never have considered single combat with half a sword. Yet something inside him thrilled at the thought. One last charge down the lists against the North's young king. One heartbeat of clarity in a life muddied by broken vows and Cersei's poison. A door scraped open. Brienne of Tarth strode in, still dressed in dented plate, blue cloak stiff with sweat and dried blood. She bowed her broad shoulders. They ride banners of truce, she reported. A Stark envoy at the gates. Robb Stark himself. Lord Edmure, Brienne answered, and the Blackfish beside him. They bear a parchment, royal seal cracked. Bay. Jaime took the parchment. The Riverlands wax had been broken with decisive impatience. Inside, 6 neat lines invited him to end the war with a sword. The challenge. Formal, irrevocable, named Robb Stark, Lord of Winterfell and King in the North, as claimant to the Iron Throne by right of conquest and precedent set in antiquity, citing the Great Council of 101. Should Jaime Lannister accept, the outcome of their duel would bind both armies. Surrender or sovereignty on a single blade's point. Brienne's eyes, blue as cold seas, never left his face. "You cannot fight with one hand," she said softly. "No," Jaime agreed. "But I can fight." He set the scroll in the embers, watching blue wax bubble before the parchment curled black. "A cripple for a crippled realm." "You owe them nothing," Brienne insisted. "Let me champion." "No." Jaime shook his head. "It must be me. I have worn more crowns of shame than any man in this keep. Time I earned them." He summoned pages for his armor, asked for Oathkeeper to be honed, and ordered the gates opened at dawn to receive the Northern King. The dragon pit had not housed dragons in a century, but dawn found its cracked dome echoing with clattering hoofbeats, and the rustle of banners truced white. The pit's cratered floor was swept and salted to banish plague. Torches ringed its circumference like grim witnesses. In the stands, northern lords sat beside reachmen, rivermen beside deserters of the Westerlands. Every man bound by the hush that hovers before the gods breathed judgment. Septon Maribald led prayer. Maester Balabar recorded lineage and claim. And somewhere above, crows watched, ready to feast on whichever destiny fell. Robb Stark entered first, gray cloak furred with winter wolf, sword naked in his fist. He turned a slow circle, meeting every eye. He saw maidens shield their lips against secret prayers. Old men leaned forward as if to taste a future they would never rule. And in the highest tier, a single girl child clutched a ragged doll whose stuffing leaked like straw entrails. Her small faith settled in his gut heavier than the steel. When Jaime emerged from the tunnel opposite, a murmur rippled through the pit. Lord Commander's white cloak draped his shoulders, but beneath it his half-armor shone dull, the scarlet enamel chipped by months of siege. Wedged in his right gauntlet, like a second, mocking hand, hung the golden prosthetic, no longer gaudy but scoured to raw metal, a lion's head carved across its knuckles. In his left palm he carried Oathkeeper, the point dragging a shallow furrow through salt. He walked without flourish. The growling silver of hair along his temples lent him the solemn dignity of a man no longer a legend, but still unwilling to die unnamed. They met at the pit's center. 6 paces between them. Septon Maribald read the terms, a litany of oaths binding heirs unborn. Each turned, nodded to his own retinue, then laid sword tips to earth in salute. "Your Grace," Jaime said, "I remember you as a boy in gray furs beside your father's chair." "I remember you killing my king with a cut to the back," Robb replied. "Today we meet fronton." A flicker of something, wry amusement, weariness, crossed Jaime's face. "Pray we end it better than he did." The Septon staff cracked stone. Silence swallowed breath. 2 swords rose, dawn breaking along Valyrian edges. The first exchange was sound, steel chanting as it met steel, sparking silver against silver. Robb pressed, heavy northern greatsword slashing arcs, meant to batter aside the king's layer's narrower reach. Jaime retreated, letting Oathkeeper wheel in elegant parries, spirals that turned force to emptiness, momentum to wasted wind. Yet each parry rang through the golden hand, and Robb saw pain tighten Jaime's mouth. The lion was crippled, aye, but a cornered lion needed only teeth. Robb changed rhythm, stepping offline, chopping a short backhand that Jaime expected a breath late. Oathkeeper twisted, caught the blow, but the torque jolted shoulder to spine. Jaime stumbled. Cheers erupted from northern throats, quickly shushed by the pit's hush. Jaime's riposte aimed like sudden lightning, a thrust aimed not at Robb's heart but at his thigh. Cripple the leg, hobble the wolf. Robb twisted, steel skimming mail, beads of his own blood blooming where the point kissed flesh. Pain sharpened focus. He let himself feel the sting, taste copper. Remember Winterfell's godswood, where every wound bled Northmen stronger. He drove forward. Swords clashed, locked. Their faces hovered a foot apart. Jaime's breath smelled of cloves and last night's fear. "I did not slay your father," Jaime hissed between gritted teeth. "But I have paid that price each day since." Robb shoved, breaking the bind. Not enough. They parted, circled, boots crunching salt. Robb's thigh throbbed. Jaime's chest rose ragged. The morning sun climbed, flooding the dome. Motes of dust turned to dancing embers. Among the crowd, silence stretched taut as a drawn longbow. Some prayed, others merely watched with the grim enthrallment men reserve for storms or the births of kings. Their next meeting was fury. Robb feinted high, turned low, drew cut and thrust into a northern shield rush that slammed Jaime's left flank. The lion grunted, footing lost. Robb's pommel smashed across the gold hand. A finger of worked metal snapped. Jaime grimaced, but he rode the pain, spinning inside Robb's guard to rake Oathkeeper's edge along the surge of the wolf cloak. It opened fur and mail, scoring flesh beneath. Now blood darkened Robb's ribs. Heat pooled behind his eyes. Anger, not fear. He let it flow into movement, a cascade of purposeful violence. Steel rang once, twice, thrice. Blow. Guium. Parry. Dot. Return. Jaime fought like a dancer out of phase with music, half a heartbeat behind the tempo. Yet every misstep he turned into redirection into cunning flick. He used Robb's own weight against him, letting the northern greatsword carve air while his lighter blade darted in for shallow bites that bled pride more than flesh. A lesser opponent would have been undone by frustration. Robb inhaled winter into his lungs and remembered the quiet of snowfall on stone, a quiet that swallowed armies. He slowed, lengthened guard, waited. Jaime pressed, perhaps sensing advantage. Oathkeeper flashed, left, high, down, an elaborate pattern meant to chain a man's eyes. Robb watched the shoulders, the core. When the true thrust came, he met it with a pivot, steel to flat. Jaime overextended. Robb's elbow hammered the lion's jaw. A tooth rolled in salt. The crowd gasped. Lannister banners dipped in unison, as if a gust had blown despair among their ranks. Somewhere beyond the pit, bells tolled for Septi worship. A murdered city remembered that faith still had hours to keep. Within the shattered dome of Dragonstone, two men forged new hymns from steel. The duel lengthened into a saga of 100 exchanges, each its own stanza, its own note on the stave of war. Blades dulled, armor dented, footstones slicked with shared blood. Roberts of old would have named it a song. Bards of tomorrow would call it a warning. The price of crowns is always counted in fathers lost and sons unmade. When Jaime's knee finally buckled, it did so without flourish. The gold hand scraped stone, showering sparks. He caught himself, rose, met Robb's next strike, but his parry came low. Ice, shattered child crashed through guard, cracked golden breastplate at the seam. The lion gasped. Red bubbled on his lips. Yield, Robb breathed. End it before your pride ends us all. Jaime's laugh rattled in his chest like chainmail over bone. I have lived for pride alone. Without it, I am only gilded straw. He braced the ruined hand beneath the pommel and charged. Robb answered in kind, a northern roar, ice thick on the edges of his voice. Swords climbed the octave of violence one final time, met at the summit with a note so sharp people in the stands flinched as if cut. Robb rolled the bind wrenched down. Oathkeeper skidded away, clattering across marble. Jaime overbalanced. Robb reversed grip, driving the pommel not to head but to chest, battering the wind from the lion's ribs. Jaime collapsed onto one knee, hand clawing dirt for a weapon that wasn't there. Robb raised his sword overhead. A gasp sucked the breath from 1,000 throats. Even the crows on the vaulting trusses paused. Jaime's one good hand closed on empty air. His eyes, green once bright as summer, dimmed to the mossy fatigue of autumn. Do it, he whispered. Robb thought of father, thought of honor unbent by fear, of a man kneeling before an executioner's blade, trusting truth to prevail. Truth had failed Eddard Stark. Cersei's lies had sharpened the sword that severed his head. Robb had sworn never to repeat such folly. He lowered the blade. I will not be Queenslayer to replace Kingslayer. A long moment stretched. The crowd exhaled, not relief but stunned uncertainty. Septon Maribald hovered, gnarled staff trembling. Then? Jaime rasped. Then you live, Robb said. To kneel. to yield the throne you stole by oath and steel. Bendo. Jaime's gaze flicked toward the royal box, where Tommen's empty seat sat draped in ragged cloth. It was never mine, he murmured. Only hers. Whether he meant Cersei, or Brienne, or some phantom crown, Robb could not know. Slowly, painfully, the lion bent both knees, crimson cloak puddling in salt. He lifted his golden hand. Shattered fingers splayed in surrender. The roar that followed shook dust from the dome's broken ribs. Northern horns answered. Riverlords wept. Highgarden knights tossed plumes in salute. And somewhere above, the crows took wing, not to feast, but to flee the thunder of a changing world. Edmure Tully met Robb at the pit's threshold, face streaked with tears and ash. Your grace, he breathed. It is done. The city is yours. Robb's thigh bled freely now, the rent in his ribs sticky with half-clotted warmth. See that the city eats, he said. Open the granaries Tyrell gold supplied. Postguards to keep order. Bandage friends and foes alike. The small council waits to crown you. Let them wait. Crowns sit no heavier for patience. Neddy. Great Jan Umber swaggered up, brandishing a cracked horn of ale. A duel fit for song, my king. He pressed the drink into Robb's hand. I would carve the tale myself if I had words enough. Robb drank, the ale coppery on his tongue after mingling with blood. He surveyed the stands where men unstrapped shields, where women gathered wounded lovers. Victory sat upon the air like incense. Sweet, intoxicating. Half a breath from turning sour. Tell them all, he said, that the war ends today. No reprisals, no sack. Any man who draws steel tonight faces my sword tomorrow. Ow. Umber's grin faded to sober nod. Ay. Robb walked to where Jaime knelt beneath guard. The lion's breastplate had been prized away. Beneath, a deep purple bloom swallowed his ribs. He looked smaller without his armor. Younger, like the reckless knight who once leapt from a tower into a god's disdain. Robb knelt, pain lanced thigh to spine. Swear it, he said. Jaime's lips trembled, but the words came clear. I, Jaime of House Lannister, freely yield any claim to the Iron Throne, and pledge sword and service to Robb of House Stark, first of his name. Septon Maribald witnessed. Maester Balabar set quill to vellum. Oaths tethered with ink and blood. A page stripped the white cloak from Jaime's shoulders and replaced it with gray trimmed in wolf fur. Some jeered, but Robb silenced them with a glance. Brothers of the Wall welcomed thieves and kings alike. The realm could at least accept one repentant lion. They crowned Robb Stark in the godswood of the Red Keep at dusk, beneath the heart tree transplanted from Dragonstone in the days of Maegor. Its weirwood face, carved by forgotten hands, shed tears of sap as red as Stark blood. When the black iron crown, no golden dragons, no stag antlers or lion sigils, only direwolf heads snarling beneath pale cold gemstones, settled on his brow, the wind through the broken battlements seemed to whisper of winter and home. Robb thought of his mother, throat cut at a wedding feast, of gray wind felled by Frey crossbows, of the north waiting across half a realm for word that vengeance had been answered with justice, not mere slaughter dressed in pretty words. He swore then, in silent prayer, that the north would know peace before winter closed its jaws. Later, alone on the Tower of the Hand's balcony, he watched torchlines snake along the city walls as small folk shared bread from Tyrell wagons, and old men dared light fires without fear of archers' shafts. The black water lapped against quays where ships bore lanterns instead of siege fire. The silence was deeper now. No bells, no distant wailing, merely a city exhausted into stillness. Footsteps. He turned. Jaime leaned against the archway, bound ribs wrapped fresh golden hand resting on stone. You spared me, he said, as if the fact still puzzled him. I spared the realm another corpse, Robb replied. Jaime's rare smile ghosted his lips. Aye, king who values life. Westeros may not know what to do with you. Then we shall teach her. Jaime nodded toward the streets. Teach them first. Feed the children. Mend the walls. Punish the guilty. A shadow crossed his face. Even if their guilt wears the face of your own bannerman. Robb met the lion's gaze and saw, behind the sardonic green, a man who had once killed a mad king to save a city. Justice comes for wolves and lions together, he promised. Down in the courtyard, the Grey John's booming laugh echoed as he traded boasts with Brienne of Tarth, or so it sounded. Somewhere beyond, musicians plucked tentative strings, testing melodies not yet certain they could become songs of peace. Robb listened, letting the notes weave through the warm night air, and for the first time since the twins he felt a world in which songs might heal rather than haunt. 3 days later, ravens flew north, wings black against a bruised sky. Their scrolls bore a single seal, a direwolf cast in red. The words within named new laws. Grain tithes to replenish Winterfell, levies reduced until harvests mended, and a great council to be convened come spring, where lords of every kingdom would shape a realm for children yet unborn. Some laughed at the young king's naivete, others cursed his mercy. But across Westeros, in silent chambers and open fields, small folk whispered the name Robb Stark, with something dangerously akin to hope. At Moat Cailin, sentries read the words beneath flickering torches and sent a horn blast echoing through misted bogs. In Bear Island's hall, Lady Mage beat her sword on shield in pride. Even on the stony slopes of the Eyrie, sweet-voiced Robin Arryn clapped tiny hands at tales of dragons slain without a drop of blood spilled. In the west, Casterly Rock's gold veins echoed with emptiness. Cersei Lannister's ashes scattered on a sea wind. Tyrion's whereabouts remained rumor. Some said he rode east on a Selsail's deck. But the small folk of Lannisport found grain at their gates and letters sealed with wolf and lion both, promising remission of debts if they swore fealty to the new crown. Many did. Some held back. Gold dies hard. Yet winter marched inexorable. Snows dusted the neck, white as a maiden's smile. Ravens spoke of hard freezes in the frostfangs, of wildlings stirring beyond the wall, of shadows in the long night's teeth. And in dreams, Robb heard his father's voice, whispering that a king's true duel is never won in sunlight, but in the darkest hour, when no sword song can be heard above the wind. He woke on such a night, wind howling through the shutter gaps, candle guttering on the table, and found a sealed letter from Old Town. A maester's cipher named the first sword of Braavos seeking audience, bearing news of ships lost to pale shadows on the narrow sea. War, it seemed, had not tired of Westeros. It had merely changed masks. Robb set quill to parchment, summoning counsel before dawn. As he wrote, ice crystals crawled across the window panes. His reflection, crown glinting above Wolfgray's, stared back at him. Older, sterner, yet unbowed. The duel in the dragon pit had ended one story, but the realm's tale marched on, pages still blank. Beyond the horizon, fate sharpened fresh quills. He dipped pen in ink and pressed firm lines onto vellum, each stroke a promise to keep steel sheathed until need made slaughter the lesser sin. Somewhere in the keep below, Jaime Lannister limped through torchlit halls, learning the weight of oaths he once broke. Together they would rebuild, or together they would fail. But they would meet the storm standing, back to back if need be. The North remembers. The Lion repents. The realm waits. Robb signed the letter in a bold, unshaking hand. Robb Stark, first of his name, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm. 7 titles. 7 thin shields against the dark. He sanded the ink, folded the page, and sealed it with red wax. Outside, the Iron Throne, still cold, still hungry, waited in shadows for the next man foolish enough to bleed upon its blades. Robb Stark would sit it at dawn, not as conqueror, but as custodian, flanked by a broken kingslayer and a host of enemies sworn new-made brothers. In that first quiet hour, before ravens took wing again and horns called hosts to muster against distant threats, Westeros belonged to possibilities uncut by sword or treachery. For a heartbeat in history, the wolf's howl was not a herald of doom, but the promise of a king who had won his realm, not by burning cities, but by staying his hand when victory lay trembling beneath his blade. In that heartbeat, a different song was born, one of restraint, of honor, of futures that might yet escape the Iron Throne's ruinous gravity. And though winter sharpened its claws beyond the wall, though storm clouds nodded above the sunset sea, in King's Landing the first snowflake of the season drifted through the broken dome of the dragon pit, landing on salty stained stone where blood had dried in twin crimson pools. It did not melt. It simply rested, quiet, fragile, stark, beneath a sky slowly brightening with dawn. All one. The purple glow of pre-dawn seeped over the Red Keep's crenellated silhouette, and Robb Stark felt the strange dissonance of hard steel beneath his fingers and soft wool across his shoulders. The small, austere solar he had chosen for rest, he refused Maegor's ghastly chambers, smelled of pine resin and damp stone, a scent nearer Winterfell's crypts than the perfumed air of court. Candle stubs guttered on the sills. The wind hissed through arrow slits, rattling vellum on a dozen desks where missives lay half-answered. Kingship, he was learning, was an unending exchange of parchment for blood. One always seemed to run short before dawn. A rap at the door brought him from the latest tangle of letters. Rickard Karstark entered, freshly washed yet hollow-eyed. Raven feathers gleamed on the long cloak draped around his mail. "Your Grace, the Braavosi envoy arrived an hour past. He waits in the throne room." Before sunrise, Robb's brows knit. A hazard of crossing the narrow sea on debt collector wings, they said. Robb took his sword belt from its peg. He hesitated a heartbeat, then left the blade behind. Kings must not greet envoys with naked steel. Have the council summoned to the small hall. Bread, salt, no wine. He swept by the taller lord, boots thudding, and find the king's lair. I will have him attend. Now. Karstark's mouth tightened. Clemency still sat uneasy on some northern tongues. But he bowed. Ace, you command. The marble passages yawned empty, save vigilant pairs of Unsullied, gifts from Daenerys Targaryen before her ill-fated march south. They knelt as Robb passed, eyes forward, spears like iron spines. He returned each salute with a nod. Foreign loyalty demanded constant acknowledgement lest it fray. The Iron Throne stood shadowed in the vastness of the throne room, points of twisted blades dimly picked by lantern light. Beneath that serrated crown waited a slender man in a smoked gray cloak, his shaven pate gleaming, face painted with the faintly mocking calm of Braavos. Two guards in lacquered half-helms stood a respectful distance behind. The envoy bowed low, hands spread. "Greetings, Your Grace. I am Lassaro Rogare, emissary for the Sea Lord and the Iron Bank. Braavos extends compliments on your decisive settlement of the war." The pause where another might have said, "Duel," hummed with meaning. Robb strode down the long carpet, boots clicking. "Braavos trades in certainty, Master Rogar. I gather you seek it here. Now, I seek only what was promised us. The crown's accounts, while improved, remain tide-stuck." Rogar's tongue danced as if each word was weighed in gold. "Yet we rejoice that a northern king now governs. The North's credit is unblemished." A flicker of grim amusement touched Robb's lips. "Because we borrow little and pay debts in steel. And in time when steel fails, coin must follow," Rogar replied. "The Iron Bank stands ready to restructure terms, at rates more favorable than those enjoyed by former regimes." He produced a thin roll of parchment. "But such favor is contingent. My masters request assurances that the rumors vexing the Stepstones will not engulf the trade lanes." Robb had heard them. Ships ghosting into harbor with sails shredded, and crew vanishing between dusk and dawn. Tales of gray-skinned raiders in moonlit shallows who spoke no words, whose eyes glimmered pale and lifeless. Some sailors swore the attackers melted like mist once the sun crested the waves. Others named darker sorcery. All agreed that caravels of grain from Mar had been lost entire. The realm could ill afford famine with winter stalking. "You will have my answer at midday," Robb said. Until then, guest right shelters you. Rogar dipped his head. The Iron Bank is patient, your grace. But winter, even in Bravos, is not. He withdrew. Outside the hall, Jaime Lannister awaited, unarmored but guarded by two gray-cloaked Northmen. A fresh brace of ribs had been taken from a boar this dawn. The smell of char met Robb's nostrils, reminding him he had skipped the entire night's meal. Jaime inclined his head. Summoned at sword point to council. How swift kingship turns foes into furniture. Robb gestured him to stride beside. I keep my furniture polished, and in sight. I polish myself these days. Jaime flexed the golden hand, now unadorned. Practical. Was that the bank's hound? Lovely breed. Bites without barking. They want security on old debts, and comfort against new threats. Pale shadows taking ships? So the whispers run. They rounded a corner into the small hall. Within, a scatter of northern and river lords ringed a long oaken table. Great John Umber, Rickard Karstark, Seer Brynden Tully, ashen-haired Lord Jon Royce newly arrived from the Vale, and Brienne of Tarth, a silent sentinel in cobalt steel. Maester Balabar fussed with inks. Olenna Tyrell's nephew, Lord Garland, sat near the foot, eyes bright with analytic curiosity. When Jaime entered, Karstark's hand drifted to dagger pommel. Robb's glance halted the motion. Robb spoke without seating. Master Rogar brings relief offers from Bravos, contingent on our promise to secure the stepstones and pay arrears. But gold alone will not feed the realm. He tapped the parchment Balabar unfolded, an inventory of granaries, levy counts, river shipments. 3 of every 10 ships vanish between Pentos and Duskendale. Half our convoys report spectral assaults. No survivors left to question. Brienne's gauntlet-wrapped table. I will sail at sunrise with any men you'll lend. Let me see this threat and name it mortal or mummer's fancy. Jaime's smile twitched. You'll swing a sword at fog. Fog bleeds when steel is true, she answered. Great John guffawed. Send me, and I'll spear the mist from prow to stern. Robb cut through the banter. We need eyes before swords. Sir Brynden, assemble a black sail flotilla. Fast river craft we can slip across the stepstones. Brienne, you'll command. Jaime goes with you. Every gaze sharpened. Karstark looked ready to spit poison. Umber raised bushy brows. Even Royce's circlet clinked as his head jerked. Jaime's reply was quiet. I pledged sword. I did not pledge drowning. Mem sawis. You'll do both if needed, Robb said evenly. I require a commander who knows Bravosi's seamanship and Westerland's cunning. The envoys will note the effort, and the realm will see a Lannister bleed for its welfare. Silence stretched, taut as a bowstring. Jaime gave a single nod. Very well. I always admired the sea. Robb resumed. Lord Garland, your family's granaries run deep. Arrange 10 ships of grain for King's Landing each moon until spring. Garland smiled ruefully. My lady mother will prune me like a rosebush, but Highgarden stands committed. Lord Royce, reopen the mountain passes to trading caravans. The Ares silver must flow if the Vale wishes voice at the coming council. Royce hammer-like jaw dipped. The roads will be clear, or I will pave them with my enemies. Robb exhaled. For an instant, he felt the old pull of battlefields, where decisions needed only the length of spear thrusts. Politics asked longer lances. Maester Balabar, draft letters to Dorne. We need salt, citrus, and peace on that front. Dain? While quills scratched, Karstark shifted. You grant the Kingslayer a fleet. My sons rot unavenged, yet he roams. Robb met his simmering stare. Your sons fell at the Whispering Wood by his blade. Yes. But pardoned vengeance is the price of peace. I pay it daily for my father. Karstark's knuckles whitened, but he said nothing. The strain in the room was a physical thing, like a frost-rimed chain linking every throat. Robb broke it. Dismissed. Prepare by sundown. The lords rose. Garland drifted close. A grain tithing, a choir of dragons across the narrow sea, and winter's first snows, Your plate overflows, your grace. I mean to eat it all, Robb said, half jest yet earnest. Garland bowed and withdrew. Only, Jaime lingered. I assume you do not wish me back alive, he murmured. I wish you back a hero, Robb replied. More dangerous than corpse or captive. Jaime laughed softly. Let us hope the fog is mortal enough for heroism. That evening, as crimson dusk bled into the city's broken skyline, Robb walked the godswood. The transplanted heart tree, gnarled, uncanny against southern stone, murmured in the breeze. He knelt, pressing palm to damp earth. Words came unbidden, not for victory, but for resolve. Father, guide me. Across the quiet pool, Arya's face surfaced from memory, fierce and wild. Sansa's poised and patient. Bran's bright solemn gaze beneath a crow's shadow. He had left them to chase vengeance. Now he must govern that vengeance's realm. A crunch of twigs behind. He rose, hand drifting to absent sword, then relaxed. Lady Mage Mormont approached, fur cloak bristling. Your counsel lacks northern mothers' tongues, she said by way of greeting. I would add your voice gladly, he replied. She stepped beside the heart tree, eyes reflecting pale sap tears. Ice melts on southern soil, yet winter hunts faster than ravens. My sisters write of wildlings massing through ruined gates. Rumors say giants stride again under crimson skies. The wall stands. Perhaps. But its ghost king bleeds blue fire now, or so old Nan's tales reach us. She studied him. If the dead come, they will care little for iron crowns. Robb's breath plumed white, though the evening was warm. Then I must forge allies broader than a kingdom. Be swift, she said, and left like a bear fading into pines. The Bravosi trysails unfurled on a wind that smelled of tallow and salt. 20 riverborne skiffs escorted the galleon Azure Maiden down Blackwater Bay. Brienne's blue cloak whipped sharp against mast, Jaime standing beside her, gold hand gripping rail. From the ramparts, Robb watched until the last lantern winked to a star. He felt a pang. Wolves were not meant to chain themselves to keeps, yet here he stood while others courted peril. The realm had no stomach left for kingly adventures. Stillness was short-lived. On the third night after the fleet's departure, horns brayed at the gate of the gods. Lord Samwell Tarly, cheeks red from the climb, delivered tidings scribbled in haste by the night's watch. Ranger reports confirm a host of dead men walking beyond last hearth, bearing shields of cracked ice. They march south at unnatural speed. The message echoed in the council chamber like doom-given voice. Garland rubbed temples. If that is true, we starve for dragonfire. Robb's mind raced. Daenerys Targaryen was ash on the ruins of Meereen, slain in some skirmish years prior. Her dragons scattered. Viserion slain, Rhaegal rumored lost over the summer sea, Drogon vanished toward moons unknown. Only old Valyrian steel and wildfire remained, and stores of either were thin. We ride north, Robb declared. Balabar's quill froze. Your grace, the Stepstone's threat is scouted, but winter's spearhead breaks on the realm's roof. Call the bannermen. He turned to Greatjon. Send ravens. Stark riders muster at Moat Cailin within a fortnight. Royce frowned. Abandon King's Landing? Left to Lord Garland and the Tyrells. Garland can govern. The small folk trust them for bread. Kingship means triage. South may starve. North may cease altogether. He addressed Karstark. Will you ride under my banner? Karstark's glare thawed a fraction. The dead took my sons first, before Lannisters or leeches. I ride. Brienne's ship was days away. Jaime too. Robb dispatched riders north along the King's Road with sealed orders. House Mormont to shore Eastwatch. House Glover to evacuate villages along the Gift. Maesters to gather obsidian from Dragonstone's lava flows. Maester Walken, now head of Citadel envoys, sent word that black glass indeed harmed whites. Old Town would ferry 10 tons upriver if the reach remained secure. As dawn split gray clouds, Tycho Nestoris himself marched into court, robes flapping. "Your Grace," he said without preamble, "Bravos grants a line of credit sufficient to arm your northern levies." Robb raised an eyebrow. 8. What cost? The Iron Bank believes survival a worthy investment. Robb clenched parchment. See Garland for signatures. And pray Bravos never collects late. The hard humor rang hollow, even to his own ears. 6 days out, Jaime Lannister found seasickness, a cruel tutor. Brienne stood amidships, feet planted like oak roots. Wind tugged her hair loose from its clasp. In that harsher light she seemed at once statuesque and human, fatigue smudging freckles across her cheeks. Jaime steadied himself on a coil of rope. "I prefer gallows humor, but if I retch again, I will drown. Stare at the horizon," she advised. "My eyes cannot compete with my stomach." She smiled despite herself. "At least you bleed mortal green, sir." The flotilla cut east between the islands. Fog banks rose without warning, curling fingers across midnight decks. Lookouts spoke of guttural cries adrift in the wind. On the 8th dusk, the forward skiff vanished from line of sight. Its lantern lights winked out with no splash or shriek. They found splinters the next morning. Masts snapped clean, sail in ribbons, deck coated in a single layer of rimed frost. No crew. No blood. Only frost. Brienne scraped some free. It hissed, not melting but sublimating into mist that smelled of old tombstone. Jaime's hand tightened on Oathkeeper's hilt. Fog that freezes wood is not mere weather. Night fell uneasy. On second watch, the Azure Maiden rocked violently. A dull thud shuddered hull to mast. Sailors shouted. Jaime and Brienne rushed to starboard where moonlit fog thickened. Something vast churned the dark water just beyond reach, bleached pale by lantern glow. Like the serpentine spine of some enormous eel, segmented with ice-like scales. Then it submerged, suction-dragging ropes taut until 2 sailors were yanked, screaming into the mist. Brienne slashed one free. The other vanished, scream abruptly muffled. Crossbow bolts fired. They struck nothing but fog. Silence followed, then the creak of timbers returning to uneasy calm. Come morning, half the escort had scattered in terror. Brienne gathered the captains on quarterdeck. "We push on," she declared. "Else we return empty-handed, and the king faces winter blind." A murmur of dread circled. Jaime stepped forward. "Our queen of fog fears nothing short of dragons. I sail behind her." The captains exchanged glances, weighed fear against pride, and bowed. Winter's herald arrived quicker still on land. As Robb's column advanced through the neck, snow flurries thickened into sheets. The air itself tasted of coppery stillness. At Moat Cailin, northern banners snapped in gales. Karstarks, Umbers, Manderleys, Glovers, a host of lesser houses, all thinned by wars passed yet unbowed. Davos Seaworth's weather-scarred face greeted Robb near the moss-slicked tower gate. The smuggler lord had left White Harbor to serve as naval consul. "Deep water brings dark tales, your grace," Davos said, voice low. "Fisherfolk swear whites walk the surf at night. Torches along the shore reveal nothing come dawn but fish frozen in their nets." "Bendosal." Robb scanned the assembled men. 9,000 infantry. 300 mounted scouts. Handfuls of archers still learning new-forged yew-bows, smaller than the host he once led south, yet each soldier bore memory of betrayal and the price of stone hearths lost. He addressed them beneath a pale noon sky. "Northmen, winter does not knock. It tears doors from hinges. But we are the wonder that shields the hearth. We march not for crowns or southern coin. We march for home, for our dead who deserve rest, not desecration under ice tyrants' boots. We will meet the enemy where the forest thins and the barrowlands open wide. Burn no field on your march. The living must eat come spring. Take prisoners if they bleed red. If they do not bleed, give them fire and dragon glass." "Benchow." A roar answered, ragged and hoarse. That night, Sansa's raven arrived from the Vale. Her words, in neat straight lines, offered 60 knights and 300 crossbowmen, riders under Lord Royce vanguard. She closed. I will see Winterfell warmed again. It stirred an ache Robb had buried, the hope of siblings reunited not by tragedy, but by joint cause. East of the Stepstones, the Azure Maiden anchored off an unnamed isle strewn with basalt spires rising like daggers from the sea. Brienne and Jaime led 20 spears ashore. The beach crunched underfoot, black sand flecked with glittering frost, though the air was warm as high summer. They advanced between pillars until an inland lagoon unfolded, mirror still, and strangely luminous. The sand abruptly dipped into water barely ankle deep. Half-submerged corpses littered the shallows. Sailors by dress, but their skin alabaster, eyes midnight black, lips purpled. Jaime crouched beside one. No visible wound. He pressed metal fingers to its throat, rigid like aged timber. Frozen solid though there's no cold. Brienne touched her sword tip to another chest. Ice fractured across the flesh in delicate fractals. Water remained liquid. Only the bodies seemed of one piece with frost. She looked inland. A cave mouth yawned. From within drifted a faint thrumming, like distant drums muffled by snow. They entered two abreast. The passage narrowed, then formed a chamber that glowed with pale turquoise light emanating from veins of crystal along the walls. In the center stood a monolithic altar of fused obsidian and ice. Upon it lay something like a sphere, translucent yet swirling with mist. Jaime approached, hand involuntarily rising. Brienne's gauntlet seized his wrist. Touch nothing. Yet he had already seen, inside the globe shapes coiled, silhouettes of ships, men, dragons perhaps, swirling in and out as if viewed beneath rippling water. His breath fogged. This is no Braavosi craft. A hoarse whisper echoed, though no speaker could be seen. Heart of winter, key to shore and sea, awaken. The cave ice shivered. From the walls seeped figures, forming as condensation does, limbs coalescing into humanoid wraiths, eyes ablaze with static blue. Spears of frozen brine slid from their arms. Jaime drew Oathkeeper. Brienne stepped between him and the nearest wight, shield raised. Steel met ice, sparks flashed. The wight shrieked but did not fall. Brienne's next blow severed its arm, the limb shattered into shards. Yet the creature pressed on, wound undeterred. Jaime hacked another's knee. Again the shatter, again relentless advance. Brienne shouted, "Dragon glass?" Their spears lacked it. Jaime fumbled at belt. A knife forged of dragonstone obsidian gifted by Jon Snow at the truce parley year prior. He drove it into a wight's chest, ice spider-webbed outward, creature caving inward, collapsing in a hail of shards and snow. "Retreat," Brienne ordered. They fell back through tunnel, while wights reformed from wall frost, pursuit silent as snowfall. Outside, sailors rallied. Flaming arrows lit sky, embedding in ice flesh, slowing but not stopping. Jaime shouted for pitch, barrels shattered, black slick spreading. Brienne, last to boards, threw a torch. Sea burst into veins of flame. The wights hesitated on sand, then withdrew to cave's mouth, blue eyes watching. 100 yards off, decks heaving, Brienne stared as the isle's basalt pillars emitted long mournful groans. Then cracks laced their lengths. The altar chamber collapsed inward. In less than a minute, the island folded, as though drawn into the sea by giant hands. A sucking whirlpool formed. Icy mist surged skyward. Then, all stilled. Only froth marred the waves. The Azure Maiden limped west at half sail. Jaime recorded every detail in the captain's log, sealing it beneath wax with stark sigil. "Heart of winter," he wrote. "If more exist, the narrow sea will freeze upon them." Word of the island's fall reached King's Landing before the fleet returned. Garland Tyrell read the Raven Scroll at dawn, rose without finishing his meal, and convened the Provisional Council. Lords Redwine, Hightower, and Celtigar argued heatedly. Some insisted on sealing ports, others on raising tariffs. Garland stood, voice cutting through. "A famine does not ask permissions. Keep the ports open. Quarantine cruise if you fear plague, but no ship turned away. That afternoon, 1,000-strong refugee lines from the Stormlands pressed against the Lion Gate, tongues swollen with thirst. Garland rode among them, distributing casks of water, sacks of barley, Tyrell knights enforcing order with flat of blade. The City Watch, newly sworn to stark rule, maintained broad boulevards for supply wagons, an innovation that saved 24 children from trampling. Word of the Tyrell heir's mercy spread faster than bread. By sundown, ragged smallfolk crowds cheered him as Lord Garden Green. Far north, snowdrifts reached the knees of horses as Robb's host advanced across the Barrowlands. Pale daylight glimmered on polearms. Breath clouds coiled like ghosts above the column. Scouts raced ahead to Last Hearth and returned grim. The Umber's ancestral seat stood abandoned, doors splintered, hearths cold. In the great hall, benches arranged as if for feast, but laid with skulls half buried in ice. The army camped that night in a ring of fires, every third man holding a dragonglass blade. Wolves howled beyond treeline. Robb stood over maps in a tent of patched leather with Jon Snow, who had ridden from Castle Black, cloak midnight, sword ghost pale. White walkers lead the dead, Jon said, voice etched with fatigue. We have slain one with Valyrian steel, long claw. Dragonglass works too, but numbers. He shook his head. Where are they now? Robb asked. South of the last river, headed for Winterfell. Their pace is relentless. Robb stared at the little carved direwolf on the map's plain. Winterfell's walls stood stronger than most keeps, but not built against supernatural siege. The hot springs might slow ice magic, or hasten steam to fog, but numbers would tell. He thought of old stone corridors where he had raced Bran, of Mother humming in the glass garden, of crypts where honorable bones slept. He would not see them despoiled. We meet them at the King's Road Ford, he decided. Open field, flanked by barrows we can fill with oil. Fire and glass on every front, archers high behind earthen dikes. We break their vanguard, stall their host long enough for citadel wagons of wildfire to arrive. Wildfire near the living? Jon's brow furrowed. I would burn half the north to save half a child, Robb answered. Jon's gray eyes measured his brother. Then may the old gods grant your measure be just. At noon the next day, a column of silver banners emerged from snow haze. Knights of the Vale, 300 horse, Sansa at their head in gray and blue armor trimmed with falcon feathers. She dismounted before Robb's tent, cheeks reddened by wind, but eyes bright. They embraced, silence saying what words could not. When they parted, she placed a small, cold object in his palm. An ebony clasp set with a dark red stone shaped like a wolf's eye. Father's signet, she said. I recovered it in the crypts after our fall. Wear it now. Now. He fixed it to his cloak. The stone gleamed like a coal in snow. That night, they shared bread around a low brazier. Sansa spoke of Vale politics, of Lord Royce's stern discipline, of the hush that fell when the common folk of Gulltown heard Robb's crown had been won by mercy, not sack. Arya was still missing, Bran beyond the wall chasing Greenseer paths. Yet for the first time, brother and sister laid plans not of vengeance but of restoration. Roads to be rebuilt, orphanages endowed, nightly orders sworn to protect fields from tyrant tax collectors. Mending swords into plowshares, Sansa mused. When the world allows it, Robb said. The world seldom allowed. On the 12th day of March, outriders sighted the dead. Gray masses mired the horizon. A tide of corpses in rusted mail, many still bearing Stark, Umber, Bolton sigils, or casualties resurrected as instruments of oblivion. Above them, mounted on a steed of iridescent frost, rode a figure tall and lithe, armor wrought of glacial crystal, eyes twin fragments of fallen stars. Wind howled around its advance, though the air lay deathly still. Robb ordered his army into the prepared lines. Trench fires roared as pitch and oil were poured. Dragonglass-tipped spears formed hedgehog phalanxes. Jon rode up, Direwolf ghost flanking. Together, they surveyed the living tapestry of war. Wolves, krakens, mockingbirds, moons and falcons arrayed beneath stark banners. Robb turned to his brother. "Give my men something to fight for, Lord Commander." Jon nudged his horse forward, drew Longclaw overhead. "Men of the living!" he shouted. The wind carried his cry oddly, as though the world itself listened. "There is no iron price tonight, no crown price, no shore or river price. There is only the price of breath, the price of tomorrow. Pay it in strength, pay it in blood if you must, but do not pay it in despair. We stand for the living." A roar rose, caught, multiplied. 1,000 throats offering defiance against the hush beyond. Robb's heart hammered. He unsheathed his father's reforged Valyrian blade. Winter's memory, the armorer, had dubbed it, and the steel drank the cold light, reflecting an aurora of violet across snow. The dead struck. They came like a silent avalanche. Arrows severed many, but dented the mass not at all. The first wave hit the trenches. Fire engulfed limb and torso, whites writhing in flame yet clawing forward. Spears of dragonglass shattered bones like glass, but each stroke left mortal men exposed to undead grapples, bites, ice-slick blades of old northern iron. Earth shook under the tread of giants. 2, perhaps 3, skeletal frames bound by sinews of ice, each wielding uprooted tree trunks. Greatjon Umber met one, driving a cartwheel-sized slab of burning pitch into its kneecap. The giant stumbled, gave an awful low moan, and toppled into prepared pits where wildfire detonated. The blast scorched sky, painting night green. The other, the knight's lieutenant, some called him, rode through smoke, frost aura extinguishing flames. Robb spurred forward. Winter's memory clashed against a translucent longsword of pure ice. When Valyrian steel met sorcerous frost, a shriek rang like crystal fracturing. Sparks of pale blue fire danced. Robb pressed. The other matched with impossible grace, each movement silent, sword-carving arcs that chilled the air into hoarfrost patterns around them. Meanwhile, Jon and Sansa commanded the second line. Vale Knights countercharging, undead ranks that breached trench gaps, archers loosing flaming arrows behind. Karstark led a wedge of heavy infantry at the undead flank, dragonglass blades glinting. They carved a path toward a cluster of whites surrounding a gaunt child with frostbit lips, who directed them like a conductor. Kill that, and an entire knot might fall inert. Robb parried, riposted, felt the jarring vibration of alien magic through his arms. The other thrust. He twisted, blade sliding off greaves, severing a strap. Overhead, storm clouds roiled though no weather had been predicted. A rumble, like distant drums, gathered. Lightning cracked, blinding, deafening, striking Winter's memory and the Uther's sword simultaneously. For a heartbeat, they were joined by a column of searing white. Ice exploded. Robb was hurled backward. Snow cushioned his fall, but stole breath. The other staggered, one arm gone, stump fracturing into crystal shards. Robb forced himself up, lunged, sliced. The Valyrian edge sheared through chest, the other burst like brittle glass struck by hammer. Fragments melted to mist. Across the ford, hundreds of whites collapsed mid-stride, bereft of animating command. A cheer rippled. Yet victory remained far. Still tens of thousands pressed. Still giants roared. Trumpet blasts from the western ridge drew eyes skyward. A column of riders, banners teal and black. House Tarth leading free city sellswards who had sworn coin to Garland Tyrell for passage north. At their fore rode Jaime Lannister and Brienne, armor frost-etched from sea voyages, bearing casks of wildfire like holy relics. Each rider carried a jar. Fuses flared. Green hell blossomed among undead ranks, carving corridors of incandescent death. Hours stretched like years. By dawn, snowdrifts were littered with charred skeletons, green-streaked craters, human corpses too still to rise again. The enemy's vanguard lay broken, the mass behind slowed, reorganizing without guiding others. They retreated north beyond sight, mist swallowing their forms. Robb leaned on his sword, chest heaving. Jaime dismounted nearby, golden hand cracked where frost had bitten metal. "You still breathe," he said, half astonished. "So do you." Brienne strode over, retrieving water for both. "The isle was a forge of their power," she explained between gulps. "We broke one hammer, though I know not how many strike the anvil." Robb straightened. "Then we break them all. But first, bury the fallen. See wounded tended. No pyres without maester's inspection. Any corpse that moves answers dragonglass." They set to grim work. At dusk, Jon joined Robb atop a barrow mound newly risen. Together, they watched the horizon, where a faint aurora shimmered. Jon spoke. "We held for a day. They will muster." Robb wiped blood from steel. "So will we. Winter may outlast our strength. That is why we must seed hope now, like winter wheat under snow." Robb gazed at miles of wreckage, then beyond, to invisible fields waiting spring. "We rebuild roads south, so grain reaches Winterfell. We hold great council per promise, invite Dornish and Ironborn both. Craft alliances not of fear, but mutual survival." Jon's half-smile was sad. "A dreamer's crown. Dreams are the seedlings of the future," Robb said. "And winter is but the gardener." In King's Landing spring was rumor, not fact. Yet even rumor warmed hearts. Word of the Ford victory arrived on raven wings. Small folk cheered in taverns, toasted. Hoisted children onto shoulders. Garland oversaw a decree, debts of plague widows forgiven. Orphan boys apprenticed to shipwrights rebuilding the royal fleet. Commerce stirred where once only charnel lines lay. When Robb returned south 2 moons later to convene the promised council, he found streets lined with banners of wolf, entwined with rose, falcon, kraken, sun and spear, even lion. People shouted not for conquest but for harvest. They demanded seed wheat, new fisheries, fair judges. It was chaos of a hopeful kind. The hunger of a realm ready, at last, to live again. The great council met in the dragon pit's restored shell. Lords, ladies, and common delegates arrayed beneath silk awnings. Robb opened with words simple and fierce. "I won my throne by staying my hand, and by that hand I now wield quill. Swords sealed our doom. The pen must carve our reprieve. Let each kingdom name its needs, and each other answer where strength allows." They debated 3 days. Taxes, levies, Bank of Bravos safeguards, new neutral courts. By the 4th sunrise agreements, fragile and riddled with compromise, stood inked. A charter of realms, Sansa had dubbed it. Limited crown power. Rights of small folk affirmed. Rotation of council seats. Grain tariffs standardized. Some scowled, others exhaled in relief. Bravos signed, satisfied that structure promised coin. Dorne pledged citrus stores. The Iron Islands, fishing fleets for grain quotas. Even House Frey, cowed by shared abhorrence of winter, offered bridge gisage free of toll. After the council, Robb climbed Aegon's high hill alone, Jaime trailing. They paused where wildfire scars still marred stone. The Iron Throne, reforged, gleamed in torchlight behind doors, shut for night. Robb touched the pommel of his sword, but did not push the door. "I fear the chair's hunger," he confessed. "All thrones hunger," Jaime said. "Best feed them grudgingly. And if winter returns full, fangs bare, then you sit and bleed, and pray your blood nourishes seeds you planted." Robb laughed, the sound echoing over empty courtyard. "You speak almost like a maester. A cripple learns humility." Jaime regarded the city sprawling below. "Hear them? City sleeps with stomachs half full, hearts quarter hopeful, already a marvel." Robb inhaled the evening. Far below, a musician plucked gentle notes, perhaps the beginnings of a new song. He thought of Arya on distant roads, brand-dreaming trees, Ricken's stone and Winterfell's crypt. He thought of gray wind running across snow, of Catelyn's voice urging compassion, of Ned's last words lost to wind. All these whispers shaped the man he stood. "We are but the first verse," he told Jaime. "The melody will outlive us." "Let us hope it pleases the gods," Jaime muttered. "The gods will listen," Robb replied, "because the song will be sung by every voice, from north winds to summer seas." He extended a hand. After a moment's hesitation, Jaime clasped it with his golden fingers. Night stretched above, scattered with winter's fading stars. In their distant chill shone also the faintest promise of dawn. Across the narrow sea, in chambers of mirror-polished obsidian, a woman in midnight silks traced a pattern on frost-rimed glass. Her eyes were twin shards of ice, her breath a plume of hoarfrost. At her feet sprawled a map of Westeros traced in quicksilver. Tiny prisms pulsed where cold altars still lay hid. She smiled, a slow, terrible curl. "The wolf has teeth," she whispered, voice crystalline. "But spring melts teeth to water." She closed her fist. All along the map, sparks kindled, distant, patient embers. She would let the wolf build his realm, raise crops, birth children. Only then would winter reclaim its due. For now, she watched and waited. A-K-N-D. Horn torches flickered across the freshly cobbled plaza before the Red Keep, their flames shuddering in a wind that smelled of distant snow despite the warmth of lingering autumn. Robb Stark stood at the parapet above the gatehouse, listening to the hum of a city attempting cheer while dread still gnawed its edges. Wagons rattled in from the Roserad stacked high with Stormland pumpkins and Reach barley, yet every 10th cart bore the black-draped bodies of plague dead or the maimed who had survived the Barrowlands ford. King's Landing wore its relief like a poorly mended cloak, serviceable at glance, frayed beneath. Behind Robb, 2 stonemasons knelt in praised silence before Maester Balabar's table, sketching thicker buttresses for the outer curtain. Balabar prattled of mortar blends that resisted cold so deeply it turned frigid breath aside. Robb heard half. The rest of his attention roamed north where memory tethered him to frost-choked fields, still littered with corpses too dangerous to burn. When the maesters finished, the king dismissed them and strode down the stair to the yard where Ghost paced restless circles. Direwolf eyes caught lamplight and threw it back silver green. Jon emerged from the armory a step behind, helm tucked beneath his arm. "They've accepted my resignation," Jon said. "Your vows are for life," Robb answered, eyebrow arched. Jon tapped the parchment folded in his gauntlet. "So the watch reminded me. But they also reminded me life is sometimes shorter than duty. If the wall falls, the oaths fall with it." Robb exhaled. "When I fought the other at the ford, I felt nothing human in it. No mercy, no malice even. Only design. Do you think the Night's Queen your rangers whisper of shares that void?" Jon's jaw worked. She was believed myth, consort to Night's King. A shard of living ice that learned desire. Desire is never void. It bends design. He peered southeast, toward ghost glimmer of the narrow sea beyond rooftops. If her heart survived, it beat somewhere beyond water. And desire travels tides. "Then sao?" Robb nodded. "Tomorrow we leave for White Harbor. Garland holds the city. Sansa commands the capital. But I need eyes on that sea. A fleet unafraid of mist." Jon half smiled. "You want a Black Crow to captain. The Wall taught you fog. So did Hardhome." Jon rubbed a pale scar on his cheek. "I'll take the old war galley Dawnfire. It limps, but its hull's witchwood won't freeze without complaint. Choose your crew. All. Sail at first tide." "No." Sansa Stark traced a gloved finger across a parchment web of grain roots snaking from Old Town, across the Mander, up the King's Road, then branching northeast toward the Neck. Inked circles marked way stations slated for new granaries. Tiny wolf heads denoted garrisons under Karstark and Glover command. Around the war table she'd moved half the pieces herself. Lords who dismissed her as soft found their levies quartered in steadings she selected, not they. Little by little, the realm's arteries pulsed again. She sealed the roll, just as Lady Olenna's carriage rattled into Maegor's courtyard. Guards parted. The Queen of Thorns emerged, eyes bright as new coin, cane striking stone with deliberate cracks. "Your Grace," she greeted, thumping the cane once. "I bring what kings crave and courtiers detest, true accounting. The Reach harvest falls 1/4 short. Drought about Horn Hill, floods across Bitterbridge. Bread riots will sprout like mushrooms if we can divert Eastern surplus. Essos wheat still rots at sea." Sansa said, rising to greet her. "Bravosi merchants want hazard pay and 4% over tariff." 4? Tell those mummers my roses wither faster than their patience. Olenna settled into a chair. "We speak of hazards. I have hazards. A grandson who scrawls love poems to the Northern Queen when he ought to breed heirs. A realm that thinks a crown can feed it, and an unseen witch of ice stealing ships." Sansa poured wine. "Winter may freeze lips, but not tongues. The lords gossip. Better they gossip than plot." Olenna sniffed, but her gaze softened. "You hold them in thrall, child. Keep them singing and they forget to sharpen blades." "Many." Sansa's smile barely touched her eyes. Songs can drown screams for only so long. Across the narrow sea, night pooled inside the Basilica of Issaros. The vast chamber, once a shrine to the maiden, later a counting hall for Myrish bankers, now hummed with a heart that was not a heart, a sphere that was not stone but congealed frost, holding storms in miniature. The woman in midnight silks kept vigil, slender arms bare to prize the cold. Around her, robed acolytes knelt, pale flesh etched with glyphs of antique runes. Their lips whispered one name in a dozen dialects. Virisa. Some called her Frost Mother, others Daughter of the Dawn. Few dared one older title, Night Queen Reborn. Virisa lifted a fragment of dragon glass carved into a sigil older than old Valeria. 3 interlocked rings. She pressed it to the sphere. Silvery cracks snaked across the obsidian ice. In each crack shimmered images, wolf banners crossing a ford of fire, a red-haired queen parsing maps, a one-handed lion stepping through storm spray onto melting sand. Verisa's gaze settled on the lion. "A mirror soul," she murmured. "Cursed for oath, saved by ruin. He will be path or barricade." She closed her fist. The cracks vanished. To the kneeling acolytes she said, "Begin the weeping." One by one they stood, filed toward door arches leading into catacombs where tombs had been hollowed for cargo of the deep cold. 10 sleek black ships waited in a hidden cove, their keels plated with frozen iron, sails woven with spider silk harvested from Korth's shadow binders. In each hold slumbered a coffin of liquid frost, seed crystals of death that could drink the warmth from an ocean league. The ships would sail on phantom winds, unseen, until they met the current of war. Then coffins would open, and water itself would become an army. Jaime Lannister woke aboard the Azure Maiden, still anchored in Blackwater's mouth for hull repairs. Moonlight slashed through open porthole, painting wavering bars across his bunk. He swung up, gold fingers tingling. An ache born of phantom limb maybe, but tonight it throbbed like omen. Oathkeeper lay across a sea chest. He buckled sword belt and climbed topside. The deck lay deserted, save a single figure at the prow. Brienne, hair loose, stared north. The wind carried her voice as Jaime approached. "We sail again tomorrow," she said. "Garland's ordering flour cargo transferred to quieter hull, so we hunt without ballast." Jaime joined her. More fog chasing. Robb marches north. Jon sails east. Somebody must patrol the indifferent middle. She sighed. "I keep seeing the dead island collapse. Wonder if we merely cracked shell while yolk leaks deeper." Jaime flexed his hand. "I dream of Shivers, those sailors who vanished first night. Their faces looking for me in fog." He swallowed. Not accusing, curious. Brienne's wide eyes regarded him. "Why would dead be curious?" "Because I lived when they did not." He offered a grim smile. You ever feel the world expects payment you've not coin enough to spare? Every dawn. She touched the wolf and lion cloak now clasping her gorget. When oaths grow heavier than armor. He nodded to horizon where faint lightning flickered though clouds were few. Storm tomorrow by dawn. No. She corrected, listening. Not thunder. Something else. They both felt it then, a subsonic hum that thrummed planks underfoot. Lantern flames rippled outward in concentric pulses. Water along the hull glowed faint cerulean. Jaime's blood chilled. Below deck. Sailors shouted as ropes jerked taut. The ship drifted though anchors weighed. Brienne barked orders, but the hum drowned speech. Across the harbor, other vessels bobbed as currents twisted. A green loom spread like spilled ink, coalescing into a ring around the city's breakwater. Jaime lunged to the gunwale. From the luminous water rose shapes, human outlines sculpted of liquid light, faces featureless, limbs tapering to streamers that brushed waves but left no weight. They circled each ship without boarding, sentinels sailing on current alone. Jaime drew Oathkeeper. Its Valyrian sheen reflected the specters in distorted violet. One turned to him. Where eyes might be, darkness deeper than sea starred. Then as swiftly as they appeared, the figures sank, and the glow died. The hum faded. Anchors bit mud again. Brienne found her breath. Message, she rasped. Jaime looked to the distant horizon. Delivered, he agreed. At White Harbor, Robb Stark conferred with Lord Wyman Manderley in a hall scented by salt cod and lemon oil. The port rang with hammer clang as shipwrights sealed hulls and pitch. Every vacant yard now hosted dragon glass-tipped ballistae on wheeled mounts. When word of the Blackwater apparition reached them by Raven, Manderley cursed loud enough to rattle shutters. Spectral sea wraiths inside my bay next, and were salted mutton, he swore. Robb remained calm. We hardened the harbor chain. Station oil casks along the outer piers. Iron braziers ready to ignite. If water comes alive, we burn it the old way. Then, Manderley mopped sweat. Pray we have wind from shore, else we roast our own docks. Better charred piers than frozen graves. Robb inspected a sheet iron cylinder newly delivered from Old Town. Wildfire siphons small enough for infantry. He hefted one. Maesters say its range is 15 paces. Stand closer, and you roast with your foe. An officer approached. Sir Jory Castle's son, lean and quiet. He bore a sealed message. Robb cracked wax. His eyes narrowed. Joan's Dawnfire never reached Sisterton, he said. Last bird carried only one line. Ice moons rising from deep, nothing since. Manderley blanched. Sisterton's watchfires burn every dusk. They've not burned 3 nights. Robb rolled his shoulders, joints creaking. Ready the tide riders. We search the bight at first light and pray we find survivors. Jon Snow's Dawnfire drifted half-submerged amid field of flotsam that glittered like frost despite the mild afternoon. Mast chewed off, sailcloth shredded to icicle rags, crews strewn in twisted shapes across deck, frozen mid-motion. Jon leaned against the shattered wheel, breath fogging heavy. Only 6 men lived, each nursing frostbite though air remained above freezing. Ghost paced, hackles high. They had met the ice moons at dusk, a constellation of luminescent orbs rising from water around them, silent as thought. Pulse rolled across deck. From each orb surged tendrils that brushed wood, and flash froze it. Jon severed one with Longclaw. The tendril hissed, snapping into snowflakes. But the hull groaned and blood in crew veins thickened into syrup. Jon ordered abandoned ship. The longboat dropped into water mercifully unfrozen. As they rode clear, they watched Dawnfire fossilize, timbers changing hue from oaken brown to pale translucence before cracking like thin glass. Then the ice moons withdrew beneath waves. Adrift now, they clung to hope of northern winds blowing them toward shore. Jon fashioned splints from crossbar, wrapped stumps in sail fibers. He sat beneath tattered Stark pennant, patched onto the longboat mast, and wrote lines in his ledger. Ice wraiths target heat, not flesh. Kill with silence, leave no residue but frost. Dragon glass ineffective. Valyrian weaker with each strike as blade chills. He shivered despite furs. Ghost rested his head on Jon's knee, sharing warmth. Toward midnight, constellations shifted. The horizon ahead shimmered with low-gray luminescence, like dawn trapped underwater. Jon braced. The men readied spears tipped with broken wildfire vials. A mad idea, perhaps, but flame remained their only gospel. The glow resolved into a skeletal flotilla. 10 hulls, blacker than moonless void, sails limp, yet they advanced without wind. Runes of ice traced prows. Jon gripped Longclaw. "Row for that mist bank," he ordered. "Hide there." He pointed to swirl of vapor off starboard where currents met. The survivors bent oars. The longboat slipped behind the vapor curtain. Waves thumped hull as giant shadow ships passed, silent sentinels steering northwest toward White Harbor. Jon watched. When last stern vanished, he whispered, "We follow." Garland Tyrell walked Twilight's battlements, gauging mood of torches below. Bakers stacked loaves. Smiths hammered. Sellswords dice laughed between coin jingle. Life hummed. Yet in every face lingered the dull watchfulness of those expecting alarm bell next minute. He paused at a parapet gap where stone still lay rubble from the siege. Hands clasped behind, he reflected. A prince of Highgarden could have remained among roses. Instead, he juggled famine and phantoms. A messenger climbed stair, bent knee. "Warship from Bravos rides anchor, my lord." Her captain begs audience, claims urgent counsel from Iron Bank. Garland followed to the quay. The Bravosi vessel slight bore a figurehead of blindfolded woman with balance scales that dripped seawater like tears. From gangway strode a lean woman in gray cloak stitched with silver herringbone. She bowed. "I am Thalia, factor for the bank. Our ledgers indicate your crown's venture demands immediate augmentation or bankruptcy of alliance." Garland raised brow. "We pay interest, though grain sails slow." Thalia shook head. "Not coin. Time. The Night's Queen wages war on commerce itself. She seized 3 of our black ships near the stepstones. Cargo hold coffins of cold. We come to offer a loan of heat." She unfurled a silk square revealing reddish crystals. "Pyroclast shards from the glass gardens of Volantis. Ignite at 30 paces, burn underwater." Garland examined one. Radiated faint warmth. "And price?" "An audience with the king, plus concession to establish a Bravosi quarter inside the Blackwater Forge district, tax exempt." Garland grimaced. "Exemption breeds resentment." "Resentment asks no coin," Thalia replied. "We ask little. Night's Queen asks all." He sighed. Arrange meeting. White Harbor's dawn grew from bruised mauve to iron. Robb's longships threaded ice floes toward Sisterton. As they neared, odor of rotten brine told truth before eyes could. Sisterton's docks jutted like ribs stripped of flesh. Buildings inland leaned, roofs furred with frost thick as barnacles. No smoke rose. Robb made landfall. Snow crunched beneath boots, though ice only webbed puddles. Cold not deep enough for such decay. They passed an inn whose signboard dangled by one hinge, wood warped into glittering sheath. Inside, tables lay dusted with frost. Tankards mid-swig petrified to glassy lumps. People froze where they sat, cards still between fingers, dice embedded in ivory-like fists. Eyes stared through rime veils. Skin translucent. Robb touched one shoulder. It collapsed into powdery snow. He clenched jaw. "Collect them for pyre. Use no flame till we test wildfire small. If bodies kindle like pitch, we risk chain reaction." Outside, horns sounded. Scouts returned dragging a survivor. Young stable boy. Trembling, cheeks raw but unfrozen. He babbled. Fragments of horror. Glowing lady on prow. Songs without words. Blue lights that made men forget breathing. He'd hidden beneath manure pile. Robb knelt, pressed water skin to cracked lips. How long since attack? Night before last, the boy whispered. They sailed north, ghost boats. Sea froze behind. Robb stood. Manderley approached, face ashen. They mean White Harbor. Or beyond, Robb said. Winterfell sits 30 leagues inland. Rivermouth leads straight there. He scanned sky. Cloudless, wind northerly. Perfect tide for invasion. Rally men, he ordered. We fortify harbor mouth and ready civilians for evacuation south. As horns blared, Robb faced inland, toward home. Joan's longboat shadowed the silent fleet through stormless days. They rode under moonlight, when ship silhouettes glowed faint cold fire. By dawn the vessels waned to shadows. He charted course. Northwest along Broken Arm, past Skagos, into White Harbor Bay. Each night, he counted coffins hoisted deckside. Each dawn they vanished below again. On the fifth dusk, sails of Manderley's war dramans flickered on horizon, canvas bulging with land breath. John smiled grimly. Now we pinch. He ordered crew to angle closer. They set crude pennant, a direwolf bleeding sunfire, hoping watchers knew friend from foe. Mid-bay, the lead ice ship turned starboard, presenting broadside. Its hull plates parted like blooming petals. Within lay rows of coffin lids fracturing. John felt air turn brittle. Loose wildfire arrows, he shouted, though they had only 6. Shafts hissed. 2 struck hull, green blossoms licking iron. Frost steamed, plates screamed, but the ship continued opening. A mist plume burst forth. Millions of glittering shards swirling like hornet cloud. Each shard a sliver of living cold. They whirled across water toward Manderley's fleet. Atop Drummond's sea spear, Robb Stark watched the bloom with dread. Archers launched flaming bolts. Most hissed out before reaching target. Those that struck ignited pockets of steam but slowed none. The cloud enveloped nearest escort galley. In 2 breaths, its sails crystallized. Crew became statues dusted in hoarfrost. Ship heeled, shattering on impact. Robb seized a wildfire siphon. Aim for the cloud center. Gunners cranked device, a squat iron tube. He yanked lanyard. A jet of neon green flame roared across gap, carving corridor through mist. Frost shards fell sizzling. The cloud recoiled. Alive, intelligent. John saw the corridor open. He steered longboat through while crew fended shards with oars, wrapped in tar-soaked cloth aflame. They reached Sea Spear's lee unscathed. Robb hauled John aboard. Brief embrace, then to business. John relayed counts. Robb signaled by horn, Drummonds to split, encircle, concentrate siphons on leading ship. As Navy maneuvered, Ice Fleet responded. Coffins on 3 vessels shattered, releasing armed whites encased in sea glass armor. They stepped onto water as if solid ground, advancing toward hulls. Valyrian horns sounded from Robb's deck. Crossbowmen loosed dragonglass quarrels. Where they pierced armor, whites cracked, but shards wrecked it. Only direct wildfire blast reduced them to steam. Battle devolved into pockets of green conflagration across steel-blue sea. Smoke and ice fog intermingled, painting sky toxic emerald. Manderley's flagship rammed an ice hull amidships, boards screeching. The collision jarred loose coffins which rolled into sea, dissolving into expansive frost sheets that thickened instantly. Pinning vessel fast. Robb ordered turn, but Sea Spear's rudder jammed under sudden ice. Enemy whites boarded. Steel rang out. In the melee, Robb fought shoulder to shoulder with John. Winter's memory clove icy helms. Longclaw shattered limbs. Ghost lunged, teeth crunching sea glass bones. Yet for every fallen white, another climbed. Brienne and Jaime. Commanding Azure Maiden, arriving fresh, spotted Sea Spear beset. They angled across ice crust, grapnels biting. Jaime swung first across rope. Brienne followed. They carved path to Robb. Jaime tossed him a wildfire satchel. Crack this against rudder. Brienne shielded them as Robb slid aft. He smashed satchel. Wildfire spurted, melting ice in violent hiss. Sea Spear lurched free, but rolled under shifting ballast. Men tumbled. White slipped, but crawled anew. From quarterdeck, John saw massed lines aligned. An idea blossomed. "Bring 2 siphons high," he shouted. "Fire upward at full burst." Sailors hauled devices aloft. At his nod, they released emerald jets into night sky. Flame rose, arched, then rained molten droplets, wildfire meteors pelting whites on deck. Screeches echoed. Armor fissured. Robb seized trumpet. All ships. Skyfire maneuver. Across fleet, siphons tilted heavenward. Starfall of green-lit clouds. Frost army writhed. Yet the lead ice ship, still mostly intact, altered course, plowing toward harbor mouth where Chain lay submerged. Robb glimpsed pale figure on prow, tall woman in rippling midnight cloak. Even at distance, her eyes glittered like twin comets. Frost bloomed in her wake. Sea Spear's hull creaked as temperatures dropped. "Night Queen," John breathed. Robb's pulse thundered. "Cut her down." He barked to Azure Maiden. "New heading, ram." Jaime saluted. Azure Maiden accelerated under oar. Prow iron shod. The Night Queen's vessel exuded cold aura that stiffened waves into uneven plates. Azure Maiden shuddered but drove. Brienne at helm, Jaime forward with spare siphon strapped. At impact, Maiden's prow split enemy bow, edging of frost and splinters. Jaime triggered siphon point blank. Wildfire engulfed prow, washing over Night Queen. Flame hissed as steam. In its midst her silhouette glowed azure. Cloak whipped. She raised pale hand. Fire coalesced into sphere, collapsed, snuffed. Brienne stared, aghast. 7. Save us. The Night Queen stepped onto Azure Maiden's shattered forecastle. Boards iced under her bare feet. Jaime advanced, Oathkeeper leveled. Frost crystals raced along blade, dulling sheen. He braced, slashed. Sword met invisible barrier. Shock jarred his shoulder. Queen lifted fingertips. Shards erupted around Jaime. Tearing cloak. He staggered. Brienne roared, interposed, greatsword sweeping. Barrier flickered. Steel rang dot. The Queen tilted head, studying night as curiosity. "Valyrian," she whispered, voice echo of breaking icicles. She stretched palm. Brienne's blade rhymed white, weight doubling. Brienne struggled. On Sea Spear, Robb watched horror unfold. He grabbed last siphon, leapt to longboat with John and Ghost. Rowers braced. They sped across broken ice shards. Frost attempted to grip hull. Wildfire vials lit bow, keeping water liquid. As they neared Maiden, whites converged. Ghost lunged ahead, clearing path. John vaulted rail. Held long claw, two-handed. Robb followed. Siphon slung. The Night Queen turned. Eyes fixed on Robb. Recognition. Her lips curled. "Child of winter blood," she intoned. "Throne of thorns. Heart of frail heat." Nah. Robb ignored prophecy. He hurled siphon at her feet. Green torrent surged. The Queen raised both arms. Flame divided around her like river around rock, licking decks, roaring skyward. Heat singed Joan's face. Yet ice at her toes steamed only moments before refreezing. She stepped through wildfire unscathed. Palm darted, closed around Joan's throat. Frost spiderwebbed his jaw. He gasped, knees buckling. Long claw clattered. Robb charged, winter's memory whistling. Blade struck her forearm. A chime like bell of crystal rang. For heartbeat steel bit nothing. Then to his shock, it sank a hair's breadth. Blue ichor seeped, freezing mid-ooze into crystal beads. The Queen's gaze snapped a wound. Surprise flickered. She released John. Brienne struck from flank. Her greatsword, though rhymed, slammed into same point. Crack echoed. The queen reeled, cloak flaring as shards fell. She uttered cry, pure, piercing, sorrowful. Frost pulses radiated, flinging attackers. Robb slammed mast, breath knocked. Jon crashed rail. The queen retreated to her ship, frost bridging gap. Coffins cracked, emitting frigid plumes. Surviving ice fleet rallied, encircling her like shield maiden circle. She lifted wounded arm. Tide surged, pushing azure maiden and sea spear back with force of storm. Robb scrambled. Withdraw. Form defensive line across harbor mouth. Ships limped behind chain. Archers ignited sea mines of wildfire studding water. The Night Queen's fleet halted beyond range, prow lights blinking cold cipher. Her figure watched until dawn smudged horizon, then turned north. The ice ships rotated and glided away, escorting her into haze. On Azure Maiden's ruined deck, maesters tended wounded. Jon's throat bore frost pattern but skin pinked beneath leech poultice. Brienne's sword, once silver, now marbled gray where bite of cold remained. Jaime's cheek bled crystalline shards. Robb stood amid wreckage, clutching winter's memory. Its Valyrian edge frosted yet unbroken, save faint chip where it had pierced her skin. The chip steamed, droplets hissing. She can be hurt, he whispered. But not slain, Jon croaked. Robb met his brother's eyes. Not yet. In warm vaults beneath the Red Keep, Sansa received desperate raven. Harbor held. Night Queen wounded. Losses heavy. Relief warred with dread. She donned riding cloak. Olenna eyed her. You ride north, the old lady observed. My brothers bleed. The king needs counsel, political and otherwise. Leave this nest of vipers, they'll bite themselves to death. Olenna nodded approvingly. Go. Take half the gold cloaks and Lord Macy's best engineers. If winter storms the walls, you'll need catapults that throw fire. Sansa embraced her. Keep them squabbling, my lady. Child. Squabbling is what I do. Beresa paced the deck of her returning flagship, Nightfall, icicles chiming along rail. Accompanying acolytes murmured healing chants. Crystals reckoned her wounded arm. She gazed at faint scar where Valyrian steel had kissed. Old magic lingers in wolf blood, she mused. But blood alone cannot fell the eternal. She turned to an acolyte. Begin thawing the Leviathan. Yes, Frost Mother. She closed eyes, felt seas pulse beneath. A monster slumbered in abyss, ancient behemoth of glacier flesh, bound by chains of mock dragon glass. She would wake it, ride it down the narrow sea, crush walls of stone and iron alike. If heat sought to oppose cold, she would unleash cold's deepest heart. Robb convened war council in White Harbor's moon septa, domed roof cracked from tremor of magic. Jon, voice hoarse, laid scrolls. Jaime, bandaged, stood beside Brienne. Lords Manderly, Karstark, Glover, Tycho Nestoris, representing Ironbank, and Thalia, with pyroclast crystals, attended. Maester Balabar presided. Robb spoke. Night Queen leads weapons that extinguish flame. Wildfire buys moments, not victory. We need dragonfire. Manderly scoffed. Dragons are bones. Not all, Jon said quietly. Drogon lives. Dothraki Kalazar reported Black Shadow passing over Red Waste 3 moons ago. Tracks bend west toward abandoned marine. Men of Sancho. Balabar frowned. Cross a world for legend while winter camps at door? Jaime interjected. Send hunters swift. If even chance exists, take it. Robb nodded. I will lead spear across sea. Protests rose. He raised hand. Realm stands because duel spared blood. It will fall if king cowers while brothers bleed. Sansa governs capital. Garland the south. Jon commands north defense. If I return astride dragon, we melt the Night Queen's heart. If I fall, you still hold walls. Nender. Jon locked eyes with Robb. Then take me. I've ridden Rhaegal once at Queen Daenerys' behest. My bond may call Drogon. Robb gripped his brother's forearm. 2 riders, better than 1. Brienne cleared throat. And knights to guard those riders until saddled. I volunteer. Jaime smirked. Where she goes, I limp behind. Robb smiled faintly. Very well. The Stark Lion Company sails on Bravosi's swift ship Slight under Iron Bank charter tomorrow. Thalia, secure strongest windcraft. Tycho, finance supplies. Tycho bowed. The bank invests in balance. Fire may preserve our ledgers. Menendshanda. Balabar scrawled itinerary, quill scratching future's bones. Before sunrise, Sansa arrived, dust of road cloaking cloak. She and Robb met beneath godswood transplanted in Manderley's courtyard. Leaves crimson in torch glow whispered higher stories. They clasped hands. You follow father, she said. Off to war beyond seas while I keep hearth. I follow mother too, he answered. Her courage ran deeper than any sword. She pressed a carved weirwood wolf into his palm. For luck, bring fire home. He kissed her brow. Guard realm of men until ice and fire finish their dance. 3 days into voyage. Slight sliced jade sea waves amid gusts conjured by Myrish wind silks. Robb stared astern where Westeros faded to dream. Ahead, stretched leagues of uncertain tide, and the promise of dragon-wing thunder. On deck, Jaime sparred Brienne, gold hand flashing. Jon stood at prow with Ghost, eyes searching horizon, as if could already see black scales against dawn. Night Queen's Leviathan also stirred. Beneath miles of ocean, a colossal islet of ice cracked open to starlight filtered through fathoms. It felt call of its mistress, began slow ascent, glaciers shedding like scabs. When it breached, storms would follow, and the world would learn the weight of a sea-given will. The saga marched on. Swords and frost, debts and prophecy. Direwolves and dragons, all threads tightening toward a single knot only fire or endless winter could slice apart. Oh, ka, na. White gulls wheeled overhead as the Slight cut east through a glass-gray dawn, her triangular Bravosi sails billowing with invisible artifice. Ropes hummed like harp strings under captured wind, and the surging wake whispered a steady rhythm against the hull, an austere music that threaded every waking hour of the crossing. Robb Stark lingered at the starboard rail, one hand on the wolf-head pommel of winter's memory, the other resting on weather-bleached oak warm to the touch despite the season. On the horizon, the last hint of Westeros receded into pale haze, a ghostly promise he had sworn to reclaim with dragonfire or die seeking it. Jon Snow joined him in silence, cloak snapping behind. Ghost patted abreast, the direwolf's red eyes fixed on the swells as if scouting depths no human gaze could pierce. They had spoken little since sailing. Brothers were returning to a battlefield older than either could fathom, and words felt brittle things against such immensity. Still, the hush between them had grown heavy as drying salt on skin. She bled, Jon said at last, his voice raw from sea wind and sleepless watch. We saw the wound freeze, but blood is blood whether red or blue. Robb nodded. Meaning she can be broken. But our blades barely chipped her hide after wildfire had softened it. Then so. The old tales claimed dragons forged the wall of ice that rose in the Dawn Age. Jon looked east, where sky and water mingled in seams of soft gold. If fire birthed ice once, perhaps fire can unmake it now. Robb tried to envision Drogon, wings as wide as a galleon's mast spread, black scales shimmering with volcanic sheen, a furnace heart that could melt stone. The notion filled him with equal parts, wonder and trepidation. Dragons answered only themselves, and, on occasion, those whose blood commanded them. He glanced at Jon, remembering rumors of dragon seed and the secret that threaded their family line. Rhaegar's son or not, Jon had once ridden Rhaegal across a cloud-stacked sky, guiding flame at the Battle of the Wind Tower. If any living man could tame Drogon, it was likely the brother who stood beside him. A sudden shout from the quarterdeck shattered reverie. Brienne's tall silhouette stooped over the stern rail, gazing aft. Jaime leaned out beside her, golden fingers gripping shrouds. Robb and John hurried up the ladder. A smear of darkness was spreading along the western horizon, too low and amorphous to be cloud. "Storm?" Robb asked. "Storms rise from the sea," Brienne answered. "This rises from below it." Tycho Nestoris emerged, cloak snapping. "I've seen such curtains on the shivering sea north of Loreth." Rhine haze, the first breath of icebergs calving. He squinted. "Yet we sail far south of those latitudes." The smear thickened into a wall of shadow, luminous eddies swirling within like drowned starlight. It advanced at unnatural speed. The Slate's captain, a bony Bravosi named Caldoro, barked orders in Valyrian. Crewmen unfurled secondary windsilks. The hull heeled as the ship lunged east, but the wall gained with relentless certainty. John laid hand on Ghost's ruff. The direwolf growled, hackles bristling. "We can't outrun that." Brienne's blue eyes fixed on Robb. "Orders, Your Grace." Robb assessed the tangle of options like chessmen scattering across a board. Fight? Against what? Flight? Useless. He felt the surgical clarity that descended before every decisive clash. Sharpened senses. Heartbeat steady. "Reef sail," he told Caldoro. "Better to face it head-on than lose masts." Sailors scrambled. Canvas nicked into bundles. The Slate slowed, nose canting to confront oncoming dark. Jaime drew Oathkeeper unconsciously, thumb brushing wolf and lion clasp at date. Robb signaled to armsmen below deck. Barrels of wildfire were rolled near the mainmast, ready for gout throwers at either beam. A hush fell as the wall fell upon them. No roar of wind or thunder. Only a swallow of sound so profound Robb felt his ears ring with silence. The sea beneath the bow flash froze in an expanding sheet, ice crackling outward faster than any normal frost. The hull juddered, timbers shrieking. Planks along the waterline frosted white, brittle. Then shapes took form inside the wall. Human tall, nearly transparent, carved from glassy rime. They moved in slow procession across the ice, as if walking on a sea-locked mirror toward the motionless ship. Each bore a polearm tipped with jagged crystal. Their eyes glowed the pallid blue of a winter sunrise. John inhaled, voice hoarse. "Mere phantoms, the drowned dead, given ice." Robb raised Winter's memory. No parley. Jaime's grin flashed cruel as dawn on steel. "At least they won't shout Kingslayer." The first phantom reached the ice climbing the hull. Ghost vaulted the rail, landing upon frozen planks with crack of splitting frost. Jaws latched onto translucent throat. The creature shattered into diamond powder that fled on silent air currents. Yet 6 more replaced it, attacking in uncanny quietude. Brienne led a knot of Bravosi pikemen, their spears bearing pyroclast crystal points courtesy of Thalia's shipment. When crystal bit glass, the white splintered. Effective, but each kill left razored shards skating the deck, slicing boots, ripping flesh. "Wildfire," Robb bellowed. Caldoro's crew swung siphon tubes toward the rail. A violent jet of neon green incinerated 2 phantoms, but the fire licked up rigging despite saltwater dousing. Sailors beat at flaming lines. Panic rippled. Any ship could be saved from sword or wave, but wildfire was hunger incarnate. John leapt from the quarterdeck and landed among phantom ranks. Longclaw carving crescent arcs. The Valyrian edge severed glass flesh with less shatter, more melt, heat conducting down blade. Whites hissed, collapsing into puddles that refroze. Robb fought down ladder to join. Opponents moved like puppets on invisible strings, each blow deliberate, every parry silent. He realized with cold admiration that they coordinated without speech, as though some remote mind saw through many eyes. He ducked under a polearm, countered with upward slice. His blade chipped but held. He pivoted to protect Thalia, who somehow found herself on deck holding a crossbow bristling with dragonglass bolts. She fired point blank into a phantom's chest. The shaft pierced, and the creature flexed as if curious before its body spiderwebbed and fell apart. Thalia's eyes widened behind soot-smudged cheeks. "The bank invests," she muttered, loading again. The attack lasted a dozen heartbeats or an hour. Time lost coherence. At last, the remaining phantoms retreated, gliding backward to the wall. Ice receded with them, sea heaving free. The curtain folded into itself, sank without splash. Air rushed in, noise returned in a wave. Sails flapping, men groaning, embers crackling. The deck was a ruin of fissured boards and smoking pitch, yet the slight floated sound. Robb spied shards of their enemies melting at sun-touch. They condensed into droplets that vanished like breath. Maester Rovos rushed to treat cuts, while Brienne oversaw triage. Jon wiped Longclaw clean. Steam curled from steel. Jaime leaned on the rail, breathing fast, eyes bright with the grim liveliness that battle awoke in him. "So she nips at our heels," he said, sending ripple before wave. Robb stared east again. Beyond this sea waited Marine's harbor, perhaps Drogon among bone-littered ruins. They would need the dragons soon. Sooner, if such shadows could cross there before them. He issued orders to double watch, keep pyroclast darts primed. 2 days' sail later, they reached the Gulf of Grief. The sky had turned a bruised violet, horizon hazy with heat despite season. Pale gulls gave way to black carrion hawks, surfing thermals above the ruined harbors of Marine. The slate anchored in mid-channel. Smaller skiffs rowed toward shattered docks, where bronze harpies still toppled, wings hacked by the last war. Jon stood in the bow of first boat, Ghost beside him. Heat shimmered off broken brickwork. No movement but flapping banners of nothingness. As boots splashed onto pale sand, stench of rot and guano filled lungs. Graffiti from freedmen and Yunkish tyrants alike covered walls, layer on layer of slogans and curses. Wind sighed through gaping windows of the great pyramid up the slope, its apex broken in Drogon's long-ago flight. Brienne and Jaime shielded flanks, while Robb advanced with Jon toward the grand entrance. Inside, darkness smelled of ash. Sunlight speared through roof fissures, catching motes. They climbed long staircases whose marble steps bore gouges the width of wagon wheels. Claw marks from dragon talons. Halfway they heard it, low bass rumble vibrating stone. A breeze of furnace breath wafted down the stair, heavy with sulfur. The company froze. Jon's eyes gleamed. He motioned Robb back and continued alone. Ghost paced after. At the apex, the throne hall yawned, roof half gone to expose sky. Rubble mounded beneath, and among it coiled a mountain of shadow, scaled hide black as midnight on the shivering sea, every plate ridged with molten crimson where sunlight grazed. 2 forward claws flexed, scraping granite to powder. The dragon's head lifted. Horns swept like obsidian scythes, nostrils exhaling plumes of ember motes. Golden amber eyes fixed on Jon D. Jon advanced, slow, sword sheathed. He spoke in soft Valyrian Daenerys had taught him. Zaldarizes, Dohariros, Gelta Ixan. Nikean Zima Gaomagan. Dragon, faithful servant, I am here. I seek bond. Drogon's pupils narrowed to slits. He inhaled. Heat thickened air. Ghost crouched, ears flat, but silent. Jon extended bare hand. Doharagon, he whispered. Servidi. The dragon's maw opened, rows of razor teeth catching sun. A low call guttural, as grinding stone rolled forth. Jon felt vibration in marrow. He closed eyes, let memory surface. Daenerys laughing as she fed newborn dragons, Viserion chirping, Rhaegal's green wings beating desert dusk. He pictured Rhaegal's final breath above Winterfell's walls, pictured Daenerys falling in throne room. Grief welled, pure as first snowmelt, and with it, love still unresolved. He reopened eyes, let tears track soot-stained cheeks. Nike, Druta, Au, Issa, Au, Naiho, Druta, Ilom. I freed you. Free me now. Drogon's nostrils flared. The dragon lowered head until horn tips scraped marble. Hot wind buffeted Jon's face. He did not flinch. A minute passed in suspended silence. Then Drogon's tongue tasted the air, flicked over Jon's outstretched palm, leaving trace of searing wetness that cooled like ice. The giant eyes blinked, once, twice. A silent accord flowed, intangible, yet sure as gravity. John turned to Robb at Stair's mouth. "He accepts," he called, voice trembling. Brienne let out breath she'd forgotten. Jaime chuckled. "Well, there's one debt notched." Robb stepped forward, all warring with resolve. Drogon's gaze slid to him. The dragon snorted, a sound like bellows coughing sparks. Robb sensed a probe. Some weighing of metal. He bowed, not as king to subject, but as warrior to elder champion. Drogon's vast head dipped in kind. The movement stirred wind that rippled banners across a city long bereft of them. Teiko approached, eyes wide. "The bank has underwritten many assets, but never a dragon." Robb allowed a smile. "Pray your ledgers survived the write-off." 2 days of provisioning turned Meereen from tomb to redoubt. The Laius Bravosi sailors discovered caches of wildfire hidden by the sons of the Harpy during final sieges. 30 amphorae sealed in wax and gold leaf. Jaime coordinated loading them into netting Drogon could carry. Maester Rovos devised saddles from sailcloth layered on mosaic floors, stitched by Bravosi sailmakers. Robb climbed Drogon's back first, skin searing where scales met thigh even through leather. Straps harnessed about chest. Jon mounted behind, closer to neck for control. Brienne, armored and resolute, would ride a second time only if Drogon accepted dual weight. The dragon tolerated Robb's presence, but balked at Jaime's approach, snorted acrid, tail lashing. Jaime raised hands in mock surrender. "My charms have limits." The dawn they departed, a thin column of ash, rose from distant volcanoes on Slaver's Bay. Omens of Earth's fire stirred by a larger hand. Drogon launched in downburst of scalding wind that flattened scrub across plaza. Robb's stomach dropped as they cleared pyramid height, the world tilting into panorama. Meereen, a child's toy kingdom. Slight a splinter on glimmering gulf, desert stretching like time without horizon. They flew west, racing sun across summer sea. Drogon's shadow skimmed wave crests. Every wing beat back horizon. Robb learned the rhythm of dragon flight, the bob as membranes flexed, the subtle nag of harness when Drogon banked. Jon's hands on spines guided pitch with slight tugs. Conversation impossible, roar of air drowned speech. Yet Robb felt dialogue of sinew and intent, as though dragon communicated through shifts in muscle and the pulse of furnace heart beneath. Below, a flotilla of Bravosi windcutters escorted, sails alight crimson beneath dawn. Jaime and Brienne rode the Slight's prow, watching sky. Teiko plotted headings, Thalia tallied amphorae. Each mile clipped off narrowed gulf between fire and frost. 4 days brought them to the stepstones again. Here, they sighted the first sign of Leviathan. In pale twilight, the sea bulged where no shoal existed, a swell traveling against wind. Drogon banked for altitude. From 500 feet, Robb saw a ridged mass, the length of river runs riverfront, rise beneath waves. Skin translucent blue, threaded with auroral veins. The creature dwarfed even Balerion in the old chronicles. Its backplates cracked icebergs like crust. As it surfaced, wave walls radiated outward, caps freezing mid-curl before shattering when they hit warmer air. Spray instantly crystallized, falling like salt hail. On the beast's neck, or what passed for neck, stood a spindle-thin tower of ice shaped by unnatural art. At its tip, Veresa, the Night Queen, rode. Cloak streaming forward, white hair whipping serpentine. She raised arms. The Leviathan's roar, more felt than heard, uncoiled, vibrating sky. Robb's heart hammered. Drogon's pupils narrowed to pin slits. A jet of ember built in throat. Jon murmured command. Drogon banked into dive. They closed with meteor speed. At 2 bow lengths, Drogon loosed fire. An unbroken column of incandescent fury that struck Leviathan's flank. Ice vapor exploded. A fog cloud billowed. The beast lurched. Plates glowed red, then blued, quenching. The Night Queen turned, her gaze locked on riders. She lifted hand. A disk of frost formed, intercepting flame, refracting it into branching beams that dissipated. Robb felt temperature plunge, armor frosted. He swung Winter's memory, though futile at distance. Jon shouted, "Climb!" Drogon beat wings, vaulting skyward as lances of ice shot from Leviathan's flank, each the size of a ship's mast. Two grazed tail membranes, carving ragged holes. Drogon screamed, body spiraling. Jon struggled with harness. Robb leaned to counterbalance. They steadied height at cost of altitude, skimming waves. Below, the Bravo Sea escorts scattered. One cutter, impaled by ice shards, split like ripe melon. Another found refuge in turbulence of Drogon's passage. Jaime watched aghast, then barked to Caldoro. "Bring wildfire to fore catapult, aim for tower." On deck, Bravosi gunners swiveled, pivoting thrower. They launched amphora, arcing high. Beresa saw. With flick of wrist, Leviathan's dorsal plate rotated, batting projectile aside. It burst in harmless green flower that splashed sea. Robb cursed. They needed vantage. He spotted chain of craggy islets northeast. Jon land there bade her closer. They descended to narrow volcanic ridge, cracked basalt still radiating residual heat. Drogon settled, tail sweeping pumice. Robb unbuckled, drew blade for land defense. Jon dismounted likewise. Drogon crouched, wings mantling in challenge at distant Leviathan. The Night Queen rotated her platform toward islets, the Leviathan altering course, each undulation sending tidal reverberations. From Slight's deck, Jaime saw Plan Dutcher. "He means to fight on ground that burns," he murmured. Caldoro angled helm for lee of island. Leviathan surged to shallows, grinding seabed. Molten red water hissed beneath. Robb felt tremors through stone. The beast heaved onto reef, half-shoulder rising like glacier. Water drained off scales in rivulets of mist. The Night Queen descended along serpentine ice ramp to basalt shelf opposite Drogon. She advanced alone, pale arm encased in crystal gauntlet, still cracked from last wound. Snowflakes coiled in air around her despite blistering heat. Robb stepped forward. "Your war ends here," he said, voice quavering yet resolute. Her reply echoed inside skull rather than air. "Heat's child seeks bargain." "No." Robb lifted sword. "I seek freedom for the living." She studied him with inhuman patience. "Freedom is lie forged by grief of mortality. Return to chill womb, pain ends." She extended hand. "Kneel, carry cold north. Gates will open, peace eternal." Jon answered, voice steady as anvil. "I have knelt to no false god. Fire remembers." The Night Queen tilted head. "Then burn." She lashed arm. Shards erupted. Drogon vaulted, intercepting with wing. Shards melted on contact with still-hot membranes, but left rivulets that steamed. Drogon launched fire, narrower, focused. The Queen raised gauntlet. At first she turned flame aside. But sight of earlier chip glowed molten. Gauntlet fissured, flames licking through. She recoiled, screeching. Frost aura flickered. Robb charged. Winter's memory flashed, overhead cut aimed at gauntlet breach. Blue spark sprayed. Sword bit deeper this time, carving crescent gouge. The Night Queen's scream warped air into jagged shards of sound. She countered with backhand. Shockwave of cold hurled Robb across rocks. Armor cracked. Breath fled lungs. Brienne sprinted from Slight's longboat, great sword blazing with Tycho's pyroclast mixture painted along edge. Jaime followed wielding Oathkeeper. They joined Jon before Queen could strike Robb again. 4 against 1. Yet the one carried Winter's weight. Frost tendrils writhed from her cloak, coiling like whips. Jaime severed 2. They reformed into spears, driving him back. Brienne closed, her blade carving sparks off Night Queen's chestplate. Frost blood splattered, sizzling, each drop morphing into tiny whites that scurried, biting at greaves. Brienne stamped, crushing. Jon feinted low, Longclaw rising for undercut. Frostshell collapsed around wound, blade pierced rib like ice. Queen shrieked, hammered fist down. A pillar of frost erupted beneath Jon, launching him skyward. Drogon swooped, catching Ryder on shoulders mid-air. John clung to spines, breath ragged. Robb pushed to feet, flame dancing on cloak torn by ice scythes. He glanced at basalt fissure belching sulphurous steam behind Queen. Heat vent. Raw gas from Earth's mantle. An idea flared. He shouted to Brienne, "Drive her to the vent." Brienne nodded. She pivoted, placing herself between vent and Queen, shield high, taunting with sword taps. Jaime mirrored opposite side, harrying flanks. The Night Queen advanced to strike Brienne. Brienne retreated inch by inch towards steam column. Rocks grew slick with condensate. Frost aura tried to claim them, but heat kept path wet. Above, Jon dove Drogon, at Leviathan's tower. Dragonfire hammered exposed arch, where ice ramp met dorsal plate, hoping sever control. Plate cracked, but Leviathan's maw opened, blasting plume of sub-zero vapor that clashed with flame into storm of glass sleet, forcing retreat. On ground, Brienne reached vent lip. Superheated gas scorched shield. The Night Queen leapt, gauntlet raised for killing blow. At that moment Jaime lunged from blind side, Oathkeeper slashing the exposed fissure in her armor. Blue ichor gushed, hissing. She staggered, toppling into vent mouth. Steam engulfed her. Frost aura battled scalding vapor. Temperature whiplashed. Robb sprinted. Swung Winter's memory down. Sword plunged through her back, pinning her to basalt. Crack like thunder tore air as Valyrian steel met ice heart within. The heart fractured. Shards radiated luminous cracks through her body. She looked up, face no longer cold mask but contorted with something like sorrow. Lips moved, silent lament. Robb felt surge of compassion unbidden for a being older than kingdoms, locked in endless cycle. But possibility flickered then died, cracks widened. Steam rushed through, foam and rime swirling as opposites fused. The Night Queen exploded in burst of vapor and shards. Shockwave hurled Brienne and Jaime onto stone, snuffed flames along capes. Robb flew backward, landing hard. He sprawled, ears ringing. Silence followed, deep, resonant, as if ocean collectively exhaled. Vapor cleared. Where Queen had stood, only scorched basalt remained, sizzling with melted frost. Out on sea, Leviathan roared, a sound of wounded planet. It twisted, dorsal plates shedding. Without Ryder's will, its purpose faltered. Drogon circled, lines of molten rock trailing across beasts' hide until plates glowed red and cracked. The creature thrashed, dragging half-frozen waves into vortices. Finally, it turned seaward, diving into depths in an agony-slow descent that birthed tidal surges rolling outward for leagues. Water closed, leaving only whirlpool scar before smoothing hushed. Robb rose, chest heaving. Jaime and Brienne staggered, limbs bloodied but whole. Jon landed Drogon, dismounted with Ghost. Brotherhood solidified in wordless clasping of shoulders. The Slights, longboats landed. Teco stepped onto rocks, gazed at sight of conflagration. "The ledger leans to fire," he murmured. Thalia knelt, gathering remnants of ice heart. Fragments barely larger than hailstones, swirling with faint blue motes. "Even broken it lives. We must store in arc steel to study." Robb shook head. "Seal it in lead and sink to deepest trench. Some knowledge is poison." She held his gaze, then wrapped fragments in waxed cloth for disposal. Victory did not yet mean peace. North of the wall, white hordes driven by lesser others still roamed, their command severed but fury undimmed. In White Harbor's streets, people wept with relief when Raven proclaimed Night Queen's fall. Yet weeks of cleanup awaited, unburying frozen corpses from harbor ice, housing refugees. Winter had not vanished. It had been denied tyrant's crown and left to seasons instead of sentience. Robb's return on Drogon stirred legends before sails crested horizon. The dragon banked over city, roaring. Small folk panicked until they saw wolf and dragon banners side by side. Drogon landed on cleared grain field outside walls, where towering braziers offered warm perch. Children gathered beyond cordon, eyes round as moon. Sansa rode out to meet brother. Their embrace drew cheer rippling across crowd like wind through wheat. Jaime watched from distance, Brienne at his side, gold hand resting on pommel with unusual ease. First time he seemed content to sheath sword. That night, beneath colored lanterns strung between siege towers, a feast of victory proceeded on trestle tables. Bards sang of duel at Dragon Pit, stand at the ford, dance on frozen waves. But it was Robb's turn to speak when horns quieted revelry. He stood on makeshift dais, torchlight staining armor amber. "My friends," he began, voice carrying over hush of thousands, "the worst of winter we have endured. The Night Queen is gone, her Leviathan sunk, yet winter of seasons remains, and scars she carved remain deeper than stone. We cannot mend them with swords. We mend with labor, with mercy, with law that binds high lord and small folk." He paused, scanning faces. Sansa serene but steeled, Jon solemn, Garland Tyrell thoughtful, Lady Mage fierce, Karstark proud. "I will convene second council in spring. Seats reserved, not just for lords, but for guilds, free companies, maesters, and yes, Braavosi partners who risked life. Together we shall draft Charter of Realms anew. Grain tithe systems, wildfire oversight, standing navy against northern or southern threat, and relief fund replenished by those most able to pay." With her dying breath, the Night Queen offered peace of oblivion. "I offer truer peace, of hearts beating, children laughing, fields ripe. It will not be easy. Yet every breath tonight proves we dare choose life." Cheers rose like tide. Later, under quiet of stars, Robb and Jon walked the ramparts. Ghost loped ahead. Drogon slumbered beneath field torches, steam pluming faintly. Robb rested forearms on parapet. "A king with a dragon," he mused. "Realm will fear that." Jon shook head. "They will fear what you do with it. Never sit throne astride fire. Fly only when realm or realm's children faces shadow." "I will heed that," Robb said. "And when time comes, dragon must return to sky free, no collar of crown." Jon's gaze followed sleeping giant. "Dragons don't choose kings, they choose worlds worth flying over. Then we have work." They watched dawn violet the east. Beyond horizon, ashes of old wars settled into fertile loam, ready for seeds not yet dreamed. They had carved a path through storm, but path must be walked each day anew. Robb felt weight of sword at hip, the chip in Valyrian edge where steel bit ice heart, a scar reminding that victory is never bloodless. Yet across fields, smoke from bakeries rose instead of funeral pyres. Children chased each other, wooden swords clacking. Bells rang not in warning but for morning prayer. A gust lifted rampart banners. Wolf, dragon, rose, sun and spear, braiding on wind. Robb straightened. "Come spring, I ride to see every holdfast planted. Will you be my eyes in sky?" Jon smiled, hand on parapet stone still warm from yesternight's torches. "Brother, I will be horizon itself." They clasped forearms. The world ahead trembled with promise and peril alike, but dawn had come, and with it a chance, for winter, at last, to rest. Endi, Inshai. The hush that follows thunder lingered over White Harbor for an entire turning of the moon. In that span the city's cracked quays were repinned with iron bolts, torn nets rewoven, and every salt-stained street cleaned twice a day by children, eager to earn the king's first coppers of peace. Wind off the bite still carried a bite of frost, yet in the market squares you could buy sweet onion, saffron, and even Braavosi pepper, for the first time since the long summer ended. People greeted one another the way shipwrights test a keel just slid from its cradle, cautious taps, hopeful eyes, half frightened of finding rot still hidden in the wood. Robb Stark walked those streets each morning before the dawn bells, hood drawn low, boots muffled in new-laid straw. He said nothing, merely listened to the cadence of rebuilding. Hammers on cedar ribs, gulls quarreling above fish stalls, The flirt giggle of young maids rediscovering laughter. These were notes in the symphony of survival, proof the realm's heart beat on. 2. He heard the sharp corners. A harbor master cursing short grain deliveries, an old woman muttering that wolves were never meant to rule south of the neck. A brazen cobbler swearing had seen the king's tame dragon swallow a cow whole. Robb banked each murmur like coin in a purse. He had learned that crowns are forged not of gold alone, but of secrets, debts, and the small truths men fear to speak aloud. By mid-morning he met his household in Lord Manderley's great solar, a lofty chamber crowded with maps and smelling perpetually of salted pork. Sansa presided from the head of a long oak table scarred by generations of feasting. She wore dove-gray velvet and spoke in a measured voice that no longer trembled when Lord's 3 decades her senior bristled back. Lady Olenna sat at her right, needles clicking in ruthless rhythm as she knitted iron-gray shawls for orphans who would likely lose them within a week. Maester Balabar had placed a sand-glass near the hearth to remind all present that words, like glass, grew fragile when stretched across too many moments. And every morning, without fail, Robb saw Jaime Lannister arrive precisely 2 sand turns late, lean against the rear wall, and listen with the restless patience of a cat who knows each mousehole by scent. On the first day of the new moon's waxing, matters of the spring council dominated discourse. Sansa unveiled a parchment bearing her proposed seating chart. 53 chairs, the number chosen because it angered nearly everyone equally. 7 seats for the great houses, she explained. 7 for major faiths. 7 for trade and craft guilds. 7 for foreign partners. 7 for free cities at large. 7 for small folk representation. And the final 11 reserved to rotate among petitioners whose grievances touch more than one realm. Great John Umber thumped the table hard enough to tilt the sand-glass. "I'll not sit my fat arse alongside a cobbler's apprentice come to whine about leather tariffs," he growled. "You will if that cobbler's apprentice speaks for 3,000 workers hungry enough to riot," Sansa replied. "Our peace is a boat with many seams. Ignore one, we all sink." Lady Mage Mormont grunted approval. Karstark scowled. Teco Nestoris, freshly arrived with iron chests of coin, nodded so faintly one might miss it without staring. Robb let the argument flow around him a minute longer before he spoke. "In 4 weeks, the thaw will breach the neck. Fleets from Old Town and Bravos must berth here without delay, yet our outer breakwater is half mended. Lord Manderley, can that stone ring be finished in 25 days? Then, with an additional 300 laborers," the Lord of White Harbor rumbled. "But they'll need wages, hot porridge, and more lantern oil than we've seen since Eris burned Old King's Landing stores." Olenna snapped yarn free, needled it through. "Hightower caravels carry oil. Send Raven and promise double toll exemption on entry. They'll come fast as gulls to chum." Sansa made the note. Robb shifted to next wound in the patient that was Westeros. "The Riverlands," he said, "still bleed banditry. Frey levies hold the twins, yet their small folk hide grain from tithe and vow no lordling cross those bridges alive. Sir Brynden rides for River Run, but may need more swords. Men?" And Greyjohn smacked meaty fist into open palm. "I'll give him 500 spears. My 4th son's itching for scars." "Do it," Robb said. "But caution your son. No hearth burned, no maiden harmed. We rebuild with trust, not terror." Jaime's chuckle filtered through the hum. "Imagine telling your younger self you'd be instructing Umber cubs on mercy." Robb ignored bait. 24 days, he thought, until lords and guildmasters arrived to judge a vision barely sketched. 24 days to keep famine from nipping at heels and resentment from cracking new stone. And somewhere beyond the neck waited the shards of winter's army, leaderless but not mindless, still wandering waste like embers searching dry thatch. When council adjourned, he found Jon atop the city's highest watchtower, crouched at rampart edge stroking Ghost's thick fur. Below them the harbor bustled, a half-sunken cog being winched upright, sailors mending spar nets, Tyrion's old catapults repurposed to fling sacks of lime onto any drift ice that dared approach. Jon didn't turn. "The woods north of Deepwood were silent yesterday," he said. "Rangers heard no ravens." Silence is often a mouth about to bite. Robb leaned on the Merlin, surprised how clean sea air smelled, compared with battlefield tanks still lodged in memory. We cut off the head, but the body staggers on. You think pockets of others still command whites? Bambandi. Perhaps not true others, John said, but something directs them. Last reports speak of a pale stag with eyes like cracked ice leading a horde near last hearth. No bones lead beasts without purpose. Eddard's shade, Robb muttered, though not in jest. He had dreamed of his father often since the Night Queen fell. Dreams where Ned's voice echoed in stone corridors just out of sight. Sometimes he woke certain he'd find footprints of melted frost across his bedchamber hearth. John rose. I leave tomorrow to patrol the Wolfswood myself. If small hordes remain, better we scatter them before thaw. Ghost can scent cold magic quicker than any hound. Then? Take 40 riders, half with dragonglass arrows. Robb fixed brother with level gaze. And send word thrice daily. Sansa threatens to chain your ankle if you vanish again. John smiled, rare and tired. I'll not ride dragons this time. Drogon made my bones forget how heaviness felt. They clasped forearms. A gull cried overhead, sharp, insistent. And for a heartbeat Robb thought it spoke a word in the old tongue. He shook fancy away. Kings couldn't afford haunted ears. That night, he visited Drogon's field. The dragon had built a nest of scorched logs and river stones, curled round it like a cat about her eggs. Robb approached within 50 paces only. Heat shivered air even at that distance. Drogon watched with hooded ember eyes that reflected the torch he carried. Rest, Robb whispered. Moon of summer rises soon enough. The dragon exhaled a gout of steam, scented faintly of brimstone and pine sap. A gentle rumble Robb chose to hear as acquiescence. Sansa met him upon return, candle in hand. She wore a shawl of midnight blue, trimmed with silver thread, shaped into weirwood leaves. A Braavosi galley arrived. She said, Its captain delivered 2 crates, one for you, one for me, marked with the sigil of the Iron Bank. Robb's brow creased. They opened chests in guardroom light. His held a book bound in pale leather, title in Valyrian glyphs, the balance of dragons and crowns. Marginalia spilled across margins in Tycho's spidery hand, passages underlined beside fresh commentary. Chapter Cessant. On states ruined by creatures they set to guard their gates. Robb snorted. A subtle warning from his financier to mind, Drogon's leash. Sansa's crate contained a single curved dagger forged of glassy black stone, hilt wrapped in red silk. A note read, In the event fire sleeps and ice wakes anew, may this edge remember. She tested weight, frowning. A wolf and a rose stabbed Tycho's ledgers too deep, she said. He invests in our survival more than our coffers. Robb touched blade, felt cold radiate despite room's warmth. Obsidian, harder than steel, brittle as hope. Keep it close at council, he said. Words break easier when punctuated by proof of resolve. Weeks spilled forward. Stonework rose, lichened waste cleared, small folk from Flint's Finger coaxed by generous tax abatement to settle abandoned farms south of the city. Dornish caravans arrived with citrus and sand-dried fish. Reach wagons hauled barley and sweet apples. In every alehouse you heard same refrain. Winter had stumbled, and the sun, though cautious, had not fled. Children scrawled chalk dragons on stable doors. Mothers scolded them, yet secretly thanked the beast for chasing white nightmares away. Joan's rangers returned with trophies. Shattered antlers rhymed in frost. A nest of brittle white ravens dead inside hollow elm. He'd burned both prizes in the Godswood without fanfare. Whites on the march still stirred north of Hornwood, but no new others had been sighted. Whatever power scattered them is waning, he reported. Yet dead things hunger. We must keep watch along every creek until spring grass outgrows their cold. Dan Shawar. The night before the spring council, a procession of ships choked the harbor, their banners a kaleidoscope. Tyrell green and gold, Martell's sun and spear, Greyjoy kraken, Arryn crescent, Baratheon-crowned stag reborn under Edric's storm. Even a single white ship bearing 3 black crows. A northern guild of raven breeders come to demand standard rate for message birds. Robb spent dawn reviewing guard patrols, midday greeting ambassadors, dusk hearing petty squabbles. By full dark he craved solitude but found none. Torches lined every corridor, musicians rehearsed in galleries, cooks stewed onions enough to perfume half the city. He escaped to the seawall where moon cast silver across water. Jaime found him there, swirling wine in wooden cup. "Littlefinger once told me chaos is a ladder," Jaime said by way of greeting. "Seems you've spent winter hammering rungs back into place." "Chaos is still chaos, even with a ladder through it," Robb answered. Jaime snorted. "Tomorrow 60 men will ask why gold should fund grain or vice versa. 10 will decry your dragon. 5 will claim your duel means nothing in the eyes of the 7. And at least 1 will try to slip a knife into someone's ribs after the 3rd course." Then, Robb half smiled. "Only 1? A merciful tally." They stood silent until waves slapped stone 7 times. Jaime drained cup. "You trust me now?" he asked softly. Robb thought of the golden hand clasping Oathkeeper, shielding Brienne against frost tendrils, taking a wound meant for Jon at Leviathan's lair. He thought too of a tower in King's Landing and a boy pushed into air. Trust was not a door swung wide. It was a window slowly unlatched. "I trust your purpose," he said. Jaime accepted without dispute. "Purpose is simpler than honor," he mused. "When this council ends and parchment dries, give me leave to ride west. Casterly Rock needs reckoning. Better a repentant lion than a leaderless pride." "Granted," Robb said. "But take Brienne. Pride sometimes roars loudest when muzzled." Next morning snow melt pattered gutters, while sunlight haloed the great hall's tall windows. The spring council opened beneath Drogon's shadow. The dragon perched on outer wall like living gargoyle, wings mantled against breeze. Inside, lords, septons, guildmasters, and small folk delegates found seats among 53. Murmurs churned as chairs scraped. Robb entered in plain leather doublet, crown of black iron left behind. Sansa followed. Scroll case against chest, dagger at hip. Robb opened with tale of Night Queen's fall, not in florid tones, but measured description of steam and basalt fissure, ending with the line, "The heart of ice broke because fire and steel and mortal courage struck together. Let the realm do likewise." He asked for first petition. It came from Lord Gilbert Frey, gaunt, uneasy in hall where many remembered Red Wedding. He offered grain passage free across Twins if Crown absolved debts incurred by his late uncle's treachery. Murmurs rose. Karstark half stood. Robb raised palm. "Absolution for debt, not sin," he said. "I will relieve tariffs if House Frey funds rebuild of Stonehenge, burned by your banners. Payment in stone, labor, and apology." Gilbert faltered, then bowed. One thorn of old blood soothed. Second came Sir Davos Seaworth on behalf of coastal fisherfolk. "Leviathan's wake scoured spawning beds," he said. "We cannot feed markets without hatch ponds and new nets." Robb ceded floor to Tycho, who pledged Iron Bank credit lines for boat rights at modest interest. Sansa added clause for yearly catch quotas, ensuring sea not stripped bare. Third petitioner, a cobbler's apprentice exactly as Greatjon had dreaded, brought basket of cracked children's boots. "Cheap leather tears toes," she said. "If guild cannot afford quality, little ones freeze." Greatjon bristled, but said nothing while council decreed leather subsidies tied to northern tanneries using winterborn elk hide, providing work for upland clans. Hour by hour the charter took shape. Fair wage statutes, wildfire regulation, rebuilding of King's Road under joint watch, creation of Northern River Patrol to deter raiders. When quarrels spiked, Sansa steered them like a swan on swift current, always with gentle but iron insistence that no voice, be it lord or potter, rose above others entire. Olenna whispered barbs that pruned rhetoric before it flowered into insult. Jon returned midday, mud-splattered from patrol, to argue White Corp's quarantine zones. Even Tycho smiled once, though none could say what made a banker's heart twitch. Near dusk, a hush swept hall as door guards announced Lady Asha Greyjoy. She strode bareheaded, hair salt-stiff, kraken sigil tarnished. "The Iron Islands accept grain tariff," she said, "but ask salt price be paid. We salvage Leviathan's carcass, sell ice plates to Korth for coin, half to crown." Murmur of dread rippled, talk of ghosts clinging to corpse. Robb weighed risk. White taint perhaps, but letting carcass rot bred storms of plague. He counter-offered, "Quarter of coin to crown, quarter to islands, half to orphan relief fund." Asha's grin spread. "Done, Wolf King." As lanterns were lit and parchment ink dried, Robb rose last. "This charter is skeleton," he told them. "Its flesh grows with your labors, its soul with your honor. We stand on quays rebuilt by fellowship. Let no lord forget the moment ice crept our walls, and dragons came not to burn, but to guard. The crown's justice shall be forge and shield in equal measure." They cheered. Not all, but enough to ring rafters. Drogon outside trumpeted, flame-licking dusk sky in answer. Weeks flowed into new season. Snow retreated northward, leaving rivers fat with melt that turned water wheels once silent. Children chased lambs across fields where white corpses had been burned to ash. The royal progress began. Robb, Sansa, Jon, and modest retinue rode south along King's Road, stopping at holdfasts to inspect grain storehouses, to bless marriages postponed by war, to pass judgment on crimes both petty and grave. At Maidenpool, they found a sept half-toppled by wildfire accident. Robb ordered stone shipped from Rosby's quarries free of toll, but insisted the sept also host a school for brewers' sons and butchers' daughters. "Faith feeds souls," he told the elder septon. "Knowledge fills bowls." In Harrenhal's shadow, they met a caravan of Volantene scholars, purchasing old scrolls. Sansa bartered the right to copy texts before sale, founding what maesters would later call the White Harbor Library. Jon sparred with young squires behind a tavern, teaching them to notch dragonglass arrowheads. Brienne challenged Ser Harry's High to duel after he bragged of tormenting small folk. She broke his sword at first clash, his arrogance with the second. And everywhere they rode, rumors danced ahead like playful foxes, of Drogon nesting north of the wall, of obsidian eggs warming in Winterfell's crypts, of a green-eyed maid in Bravos claiming to be wolf blood returned from death. Robb forbade pursuit of rumor while harvest remained uncertain, yet at night he dreamed of Arya's wild grin and wondered. In late summer, the progress reached King's Landing. The city greeted them with banners freshly dyed, wolves and roses interlaced, krakens coiled about lions, sun spears thrust skyward beside falcon moons. Reconstruction of Flea Bottom was well underway. Crooked alleys widened, new cisterns laid, plague pits sealed beneath lime. Garland Tyrell met them on Rivergate steps, reporting bread prices halved, crime down, and 600 orphans apprenticed to guilds. Robb walked the streets unarmored, heard laughter from windows that once rattled with screams. He did not delude himself. Hunger still prowled. Injustice darkened many thresholds. Gold cloaks could grow corrupt again. Small folk could remember old grudges. Yet the tide rolled different now, guided by compacts hammered together in Glacier's furnace. 2 evenings before their planned return north, Drogon swept low over Blackwater, startling gulls into spirals. Jon was atop him, face lit by sunset's cherry hue. He landed within the dragon pit's restored dome, where Robb waited. "Ghost-scented white spoor near Shadow Tower," Jon said, sliding to ground. "Not a horde, but clusters. Every fortnight they rise anew, as if pulled by strings buried deep. Leviathan's death tremor may still echo," Robb offered. "Or some shard of Night Queen's heart still stirs." Robb remembered fragments sealed in lead and sunk beyond Sea Lord's stars. "Bravos swore they sank them 2 miles under," he said. "Depth holds many secrets," Jon answered. They resolved that come autumn they'd assemble a ranging. 50 rangers, 10 maesters, 3 pyromancers, and, if need be, Drogon himself, to scour the far north for secret altars. "We uproot seeds before they sprout," John said. The next day ravens brought separate tidings. Word from River Run that Frey laborers had indeed begun to raise walls at Stonehenge under Blackfish's watch, and a sealed scroll from Korth confirming purchase of Leviathan ice, payment to be delivered in spices and silk equivalent to 4,000 golden dragons. Robb laughed. Greyjoy's cut funds new fishing jetties. Salt price yielded harvest indeed. In the royal septi that evening, Sansa knelt before the statue of the mother, candle in hand. Robb approached quietly, waiting. At length she spoke. I thought I would find only ashes in this city, but gardens bloom between stones. Even Harrenhal's slag feeds wildflowers, he said. She smiled, looking older than her years yet bright. When I was a girl, I believed songs ended with weddings and crowns. Now, I see songs are rivers. You cannot bind their ends any more than you can chain the sea. He offered hand. She rose. Then let ours keep flowing, he said. Through every valley. The royal party departed King's Landing on a mild dawn. As they crossed the Trident, they saw fishermen hauling nets heavy with wriggling bream, and children waving linen strips dyed with direwolf sigils. At the Crossroads Inn, travelers from Dorne and the north shared a single long bench, passing jugs of orange wine and hot mead, while debating crop schedules. South of the Twins, Karstark's spear levy drilled alongside Frey bowmen. No blood spilled. One night, beneath the glowing arc of Harpstar, Robb sat watch by campfire. The coals shifted, cracked like antlers in frost, and for an instant he saw Ned Stark across the flame's heart, not grisly severed head, but whole, cloaked in gray, eyes proud. You mended what I could not, the vision seemed to say. But remember, a sword kept sheathed too long loses edge. Robb blinked. Sparks spiraled upward. The form was gone. Yet in his chest a new stillness settled. A quiet readiness for labors still unnamed. By first leaf fall, they reached Winterfell. The castle stood half rebuilt, scaffolds draped in crimson-leafed ivy. Springs steamed through courtyard, carrying scent of moss and warm stone. Bran's weirwood, transplanted from beyond the wall under Maester's protest, had taken root in Godswood. Its carved face wept red sap each dawn as though greeting the sun it once forgot. Sansa dismounted, eyes shining. Jon brushed fingers across cold gray walls, murmuring thanks to crows spiraling above. Robb stepped through gatehouse arch and felt foundation thrum beneath boots, as if castle's heart recognized lost sun's stride. He looked to banners flying high, direwolf rampant, unfurled by honest wind. No dragon wings up here, Drogon circled far overhead, respectful of home not his. Robb breathed, scented air, crisp with distant snow and apple smoke, and knew despite all scars this land would rise again if shepherded with steady hand. Night embraced Winterfell gently that evening, hearths crackling in every hall. Robb called feast for builders, farmers, smiths, and scullery maids alike. They packed the great hall, voices weaving tapestry of belonging. Greyjohn led toast to first king to eat same fare as small folk. Onion leek stew, black bread, honeyed parsnips. Robb answered with promise. No fray of veneer shall divide lord and landed. We are one pack. Later, after music faded and guests drifted to straw pallets, he wandered ramparts alone. Stars salted sky. Aurora flickered pale green at northern rim. He felt neither victory's swell nor burden's weight, only a current of forward motion, as if world itself marched beside him. From courtyard came ghost of sound, hammer tapping, child laughing, direwolf yipping in sleep. It blended into a lullaby older than castles. Sansa joined him, cloak billowing. You never stop, she whispered. Winter never stops, he said, arms resting on stone still warm from day's sun. But spring has will of its own. He pointed north where horizon shimmered. The thaw line moves each night. Soon barley shoots will push through field graves and claim what death could not. Her gaze softened. And after spring? Summer gardens, autumn feasts. He paused. Another winter, but we will meet it as we met the last. Together, fire beside ice, word beside sword. Below, Drogon shifted wings, tail curling around watchtower base, content. Jon's silhouette moved along inner yard, ghost trotting close. Brienne sparred with a smiling maidenpool girl wielding broom handle. Sparks of lanterns danced around them like fireflies. Somewhere Greyjohn sang an obscene lullaby to stone-drunk builders, and miraculously, was off-key. Robb closed eyes and heard his father's words again, those whispered before every campaign. A lord's duty is not to wall his people from storm, but to teach them to plant seeds that may outlive it. He opened eyes to starlight and thought, we planted seeds in frost, yet they sprout. Far to the south, Carthene spice merchants toasted profits of ice harvest. In Bravos, lead chest containing heart shards sank another fathom as currents tugged. Tiny cracks glimmered but held. In the ruins of Valyria, 3 dragon eggs quickened under volcanic ash, stirred by song no man could hear. And somewhere in the western rivers, a girl with a blade named Needle smiled at rumors of a wolf king and set her course for home. Robb Stark watched lights dance beyond the wall and felt the wheel turn. Kings die. Seasons pass, yet stories endure. The song of wolves and dragons had only just begun, and dawn waited patient beyond midnight's rim.